the right club. Be the right club today.
Johnny, that's better than most.
How about him?
That is better than most. Better than most.
Expect anything different?
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the No Laying Up podcast. My name is DJ. It's our Sunday episode technically, but it's going to be a lot different than our normal Sunday episode. That's because we're off filming a season of our travel series, Tourist Sauce. And so what you're going to get tonight is actually part 2 of our deep dive on architect extraordinaire Pete Dye. If you've not listened to part 1, that should be the previous one in the feed. Go check that out. Me, Neil, and Charlie Van Kirk having a lengthy chat about Pete's bio. The first couple courses that we wanted to cover, we're doing this as kind of a history of Pete Dye in 10 golf courses. So we covered the first 3 in episode 1. We're going to cover the rest of them here in episode 2. Lots of fun. Excited to get into the remainder of our research today on this episode. Before we get started, want to give a shout out, as always, to our friends at Titleist, presenting sponsor of this here podcast. Like I mentioned, we are off shooting our travel series of Tourist Sauce right now. I'm probably standing somewhere in Scotland right now with a GTS2 driver in my hand, maybe even feeling whiffs of confidence off the tee for the first time in quite a while. I got fit for the GTS driver. It's been a couple weeks now. I feel like I finally have worked out any kinks. I'm used to it. I'm ready to rock. And it's been truly delightful. I just checked my Arcos right before this. I'm actually gaining shots with my driver for the first time in quite a while. I ended up getting fit, like I said, into the GTS 2. It was a good fitting process because there's a lot of combinations. There's a lot of stuff to look into, a lot of levers. You've got weights in the front, you've got weights in the back, you've got a lot of different combos, which just leads to a lot of different improvements. I have what I would call a little bit easy power. Don't feel like I have to swing out of my shoes to still get the ball out there, which is made, the dispersions become tighter with the weights in the back, feeling more stability. It's a great combo of speed and stability, and it's been really, really fun to hit off the tee. And I hope I'm standing in the middle of a fairway right now after just striping one. But if you have not been fit recently, there's a good chance you're leaving performance on the table. So head to Titleist.com to find a GTS fitting near you. Let's get on with the program. Part 2, guys, our Pete Dye deep dive rounds for home. We're doing part 2 tonight. Sun's going to be going down behind me. It's a little Pete Dye after dark, which is fitting. We've got some characters in this half. Neil, how are you? Ready to go, man?
Oh, man. I just want to shout out to anybody that's going back to back on these. It's listening to it, a week after we put them out, because we're going back to back, baby. Had a little dinner, had a little witching hour, and now we're going to get into it, all right? I'm doing fantastic, Deej. Let's go.
The kids are asleep. The high noons have cracked. It looks like you got a little summer shandy, a little taste of Chippewa Falls going on over there.
I decided, just a cold summer beer sounded like something that Paul Dye would be into.
I love
maybe
it.
Paul Jr. as well.
You know what? He was into it. Yeah.
Up to a point.
Hold that for a second.
Up to a point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Charlie Van Kirk is here as well. Charlie, what's up?
Good evening. Characters welcome. Ready for this round 2. Excited to throw Neil as many curveballs as we can.
Yeah, let's do it. Let's get right into it. If you missed the last episode, go back and listen to it. But if you refuse to do so, we talked a lot of biography of the great man Pete Dye. We talked about the first 3 of 10 golf courses that we're going to get into in detail. We talked about Crooked Stick. We talked about the golf club up in Ohio, not to be confused with the country club, Neil. And we talked about Harbor Town and the heritage and the Jack Nicklaus of it all, and
Spice Bush,
a Spice Bush, a lot of good stuff in part 1. In part 2 here, we're gonna, like I said, we're gonna focus on the last 7 golf courses. We're gonna get into some heavy hitters that people know, that people have watched on TV. It's a really fun lineup. We've got a lot more firsthand audio, a lot of good photos. It's gonna be great. So
can I just, before we go any farther, can I tell you what I couldn't stop thinking about in the dark while I was feeding my son Wes about like 45 minutes ago? That Pete Dye gambled away his GI Bill money? Like, did he pay that? Like, we just kind of what was that a tall tale? Did he literally just leave college? throw the clubs in the creek and leave?
My impression was that it was not the entire GI Bill, but maybe like that month's allotment or that week's allotment or something. He wasn't very specific about it in the book, that part of it, but the story itself was so specific, him leaving his bride to be in the lurch on a playoff hole, that I figure it has to be at least somewhat true.
Yeah. I mean, just that one, I was just thinking, I was like, man, that's a big miss there. Like, I know it all worked out for him, but that was really stupid.
A lot of these stories don't really hold up to kind of that first order of poking holes, you know. So it's better to just kind of take them at face value and move
I mean, we
right
talked
on.
about a lot, but I was like, man, let me just double click right on that one in like the first 30 minutes. Was that what I heard? Okay.
Again, if you missed part 1, go back and listen to it. If you're not going to do that, we're doing the Pete Dye and 10 golf courses. We've been trying to give Neil some song comps. I realized I think we missed on Harbor Town.
I didn't really
have a good one. Charlie, did you have a good one for Harbor Town?
My prompt was, let me read my prompt. It was the single that really launched the career, a little more refined and less bombastic than his later works. Possibly a prominent collab with Mr. Nicholas. I don't have a good answer for it, but I'm sure someone does.
I mean, I'm going to first go to the Beatles. You know that. I think like something like Something, you know, a little softer, like, oh, this George guy, he can really do it, is, you know, but he's kind of in partnership with the rest of the squad. Yeah. That comes to mind.
I was thinking, this isn't going to hold up in court, but Sting and the Police.
Sure.
Like maybe it's the Police, and then like he goes off and becomes Sting on his own. You know,
I'm not familiar enough with the Police to know where it's going to fall in the discography.
Or who did like, who else was in Genesis? Maybe Phil Collins.
I forget who played guitar.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of a star that had like a really good like, you know, group or collaboration, and then just probably a more successful career on their own, leaving behind Nicholas. But then you have to have like a power play. It almost has to be a duo that broke up.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned Eric Clapton in the last episode, you know, and some of the Yardbirds.
What about Wham? Who was in Wham? Wasn't that like two heavyweights?
George Michael.
Yeah, but who was the other guy? Oh no, maybe the Doobie Brothers.
Sure.
Michael Mick.
I would kind of say that Nicholas is Michael McDonald and Dye is Kenny Loggins, or we could go the other way with that.
Michael McDonald might be more like one of these shapers that we're going to get into. He was kind of just a hired gun in a lot of.
Yeah.
We got to get this thing back on there. This is going to be 4 hours. If we're not doing this, Neil. We gotta
send in some comps for Hilton Head Heritage, that whole deal.
I need DJ singing the Steely Dan Michael McDonald background vocals now from Asia. Thank you very much.
You got to think that all the dads in Hilton Head love Doobie Brothers too.
I think
that one, we're on to something.
And the many iterations of Michael McDonald. I think that's the best karaoke performance I've ever seen. It was like 2:00 in the morning at Cole Haynes in Atlantic Beach, and these two guys sang "What a Fool Believes." It was like I was like moved to tears. It was unbelievable. So good.
Sick.
What were we talking about? Okay. So one thing we didn't really touch on, kind of on the recurring Pete Dye themes and isms. One of the things I really like, Charlie, you surfaced this. He had this penchant for hiring guys that weren't necessarily golf course guys. There was a lot of guys that became golf course guys, and he did hire a lot of golf course guys as well. But he was not shy to hire construction workers, people who didn't really have any preconceived notions about golf courses, which I really, really dug, and I think we're going to see pop up in this episode.
Sounds like somebody else we know, Deej.
Exactly
Sounds
right.
Like CB.
That's right.
Neil, he liked him young and impressionable. You know.
Well, not Stanford White, more CB and Rayner is what I was getting at there.
He also liked, I think we skipped past this in the first part agenda, and I had this in big bold letters because I know Neil's going to love it too. He loved men of action. You know, He loved like, don't make me make it bigger. You make it miss on the high side.
I will pull you back. Okay.
Yes.
I have a firm grip over the reins and I will yank the chain, but
yes,
I don't want to have to go to the whip.
Yes. And I think Charlie, you fill in the gaps, but it sounds like you heard a bunch of people talk about that.
Oh, absolutely. Miss on the high side, for sure. I mean, to the young crew thing, there was also a little bit of double-digit handicaps need not apply. Like he liked guys who didn't know anything about golf course building, but who love the game and were good players, which we're going to get into in some of
And
these.
that's a small Venn diagram, I got to think.
It is, but it's if you find him, that's, I think that speaks to like, he wasn't out there trying to micromanage. I think, sorry, I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but there's a lot of like interpretation and him kind of waving his hands and like making people figure it out. And I think you had to have some requisite knowledge of the game in order to kind of figure out what he was talking about. He just didn't necessarily want it to be like, oh, do it exactly like this golf course. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
He had his own vernacular. He called it Urbana-ese that required sophisticated translations from some of his more trusted lieutenants. So there's some funny stories about him grumbling about something, and then his lieutenant would go to the crew and said, okay, Mr. Dye has no idea what he wants. He doesn't like what we've done, but we're going to go out and try some more things until he does like what ends up happening.
That's a great spot.
He's just going to know it when he sees it.
Exactly.
So don't worry.
Exactly. It's really threading that needle between I'm making it all up as I go, but I do kind of know what I want. So if you could just meet me halfway, it's really, really fun stuff. But
it's not the most affordable way to build a golf course, as it turns out.
It's true.
Not efficient.
All right, the first golf course we're going to talk about today of the 7 that we have left to get to is a course that Neil and I have been to. We went there earlier this year. Down in the Dominican Republic, we are, of course, talking about Teeth of the Dog. Song comp here, history of rock and roll in 10 songs. This was Charlie's prompt. Some of the strongest raw songwriting in the catalog, showy and wild, recorded with simple tools, analog record, no heavy machinery, lots of hand tools, crazy manual labor. I mean, what struck out to me is just, again, we're talking mainstream stuff here. It's Led Zeppelin. It's a whole lot of love.
Or prog rock, but maybe too much synth and effects in prog rock. It feels like Bonham.
Yeah, it's just thunderous, Charlie, is that you? Can you get down with that?
Fully down with Bonham. Yes. Give me a whole lot of love.
You could argue for me is a power trio. You could talk me into Rush.
Of course. Working man. I know how you feel about that one. Well, let's get down to it. Charlie, how did Pete actually get linked up with the folks in the Dominican Republic to begin with? Because he ends up doing a ton of work down there.
Pete was friends with the CEO of Gulf and Western, which was the sugar conglomerate who. We'll hear more about them momentarily, who developed this site and ran a sugar mill, still run, I believe. Well, it's new ownership now, but they ran the sugar mill there at the time. Pete was friends with Charles Bloodhorn, the CEO. Pete doesn't talk about, I know, BLUD horn, but yeah, just epic stuff.
I think they owned Columbia Pictures too. I think really? Gulf and Western was like, maybe I'm getting that wrong, but I feel like Gulf and Western, like when you say conglomerate, was
doing a little bit of everything.
Yeah, I think they had their fingers in a lot of stuff.
Well, in 1969, Pete is driving around the Dominican Republic. He's got some people who look like they want to build a golf course. They're trying to find a site. He's driving all over the place. He's a little worried. He's on a wild goose chase. Described this southeastern coastline as desolate. Said he's bumping along a narrow dirt road. I passed through the town of La Romana, and almost by accident, I saw before me the most beautiful seaside location for a golf course I had ever seen. We talked a little bit about kind of the ownership group, but development of the resort here at Costa de Campo radically changed the tourism landscape for the area around La Romana, which is the big city right next to Costa de Campo. City's founded in 1897 as an oil town, but sugar quickly took over as the dominant industry in 1917. In 1960, fast forward a little bit, Gulf and Western purchased the sugar mill and invested in the livestock industry as well. And soon 330,000 tons of raw sugar were being produced per year at the mill in La Romana. I don't have a ton of scale on that one, but 330,000 tons seems like a lot of sugar. I'm gonna say that's a lot. Cuban-born Alvaro Carta was running the mill in the Dominican Republic, but sought some alternative revenue sources for his newly adopted country. According to Pete, it sounded like Carta had learned from Cuba, maybe don't put all your eggs in the sugar export basket.
Sure.
That can go sideways on you quick. And so enter now tourism. Let's get some tourists here spending some dough. And so his first proposed site that he was showing Pete was near the Santo Domingo airport. Pete was not excited about this land at all, lacked an adequate water source, wasn't going to work. So he asked him for some other ideas. And it's, I don't know, I'm trying to think of like what movie I'm thinking of where there's a similar, you know what it is? It's Almost Heroes. Do you perhaps take gold? It's that thing where Mr. Carter's like, well, you know, I do have this other 400,000 acres. Do you think that might work? Like close to the mill? And they went and looked at it. It was 60 miles from the airport. And so as we talked about in our videos, I mean, it's wilderness, man. There's nothing going on. You know, the roads are unpaved.
I mean, to give you a sense of this though, Cody pointed this out to me when we were on the way to the airport. He was like, look at the fence post. It's so like lush down here that like they chop down trees and then plant like the tree starts like zombie, like leaves are coming out of the fence post. It's like, they just like regerminate. Yeah. It's crazy.
It is. It's nuts. So that just carry that overtone throughout this entire conversation is just, you got to tame this wilderness and somehow figure out how to put a golf course there. It's a whole lot of love. Charlie, let me ask you this. Is 400,000 acres, is that going to be enough for our guy?
It was not, in fact.
Really?
400,000 acres was not enough. We talked about this in New Albany, Ohio. Our man just had a knack for just finding the edges of those.
He's painting the corners. He's like, no, I got to put this up in the top of the strike zone, man. I'm sorry. You guys just like, can we fill in the ocean? I got to get a little more out there.
He started trying to do that as well with some rocks later on, filling in ocean and building tee boxes out on precipices as you experienced. But he was approached by the apoplectic vice president of the sugarcane company mid-construction, who apparently was stammering. He was so stressed that Pete had wandered too far east and was violating Dominican law by digging on someone else's land. No problem. Mr. Alvaro Carta purchased the additional acres the next day. Recurring theme. On the subject of resources, Pete caught wind of a rumor early on. He became stressed because he thought that someone had said that only $50,000 had been allocated to build the entire course, which is about $450K adjusted for inflation. So Pete confronted Mr. Carta like, what's going on here? If I can't build this on 50K. That's enough for maybe one hole. And Mr. Carta informed Pete that that was the amount allocated per day of construction.
Sugar, good business.
Very good business. Yes. So Pete's supervisor on this job at Casa de Campo was a guy named Bruce Mashburn, aka Senior Bruce.
So he's like the foreman when you say supervisor.
Yeah. Bruce, again, in kind of one of those bridge moments, right? He was a guy that had worked with Donald Ross. He'd worked with George Cobb. He was not one of the construction worker type guys that we're talking about. He was a real pro's pro. He was not kind of one of those 20-something green lieutenants that we're gonna hear about in a little bit. 62 years old. He had frosted hair, a ruddy complexion, the look of a prosperous Philadelphia banker. Love that turn of phrase by Pete. He also says that Bruce was, to what we were talking about on the jump, he was able to read Pete's thoughts. He knew what he meant when he kind of waved his hand and did one of those, which is invaluable on a project like this. And he was also revered by the Dominicans who worked with him, because there were a lot of Dominican laborers working on this project.
Right to work country.
That's right.
If you want a job, we're going to get you a job.
Yeah.
I guess this would be after, what was that dictator's name? Robert Trujillo. I think he died in the 60s.
Is that right? Robert Trujillo is the bass player for Metallica.
I think that's his name. No, Rafael Trujillo. There we go. That's a good mix-up, though.
This one could be Battery, but that could be another good song comp.
We referenced manual labor in the song comp, and this is why. Pete says in the book that because the cost to import golf course construction machinery was prohibitive, allegedly, we had to rely entirely upon the machinery used for growing sugarcane. So manpower over horsepower. They had 300 Dominican workers molding the course. They dug a bunch of dirt a mile from the site and hauled it in on sugarcane carts pulled by oxen. What I don't understand is that, if we're talking $450,000 adjusted for inflation per day of construction, Gulf and Western provided Pete with a helicopter and 300.
Couldn't get a tractor.
Couldn't get a dozer in there. What are we talking about?
Yeah, there is some questions to be asked. I do agree with that.
I mean, but just think about with no infrastructure around, like you got to build the whole, like the roads, I don't know. It's not just, you're not just building the golf course here. You're kind of building like the way that you see neighborhoods get built. You got to build those cul-de-sacs first to get, I guess if you're not using heavy machinery, maybe not as much. So that's probably some of it too.
No, but I mean, if you're building for, infrastructure, people getting in and out and all that stuff is, I agree. All that stuff's, I mean, on that note, you were there, Neil, it's very rocky. There's boulders everywhere. So there were boulders lying in all over these like proposed fairways. So to Charlie's point, like this team of 300 people would just have to get all these rocks out of the fairway, like huge rocks, get them loaded onto canes, on sugarcane carts, and get them pulled away. And then they would stack them into these like really high walls that you can see, those big stone walls that you see at Casa de Campo. And when they were finished, that wall ended up being like nearly 2 miles long, contained more than 20,000 tons of rock, which is all, again, like moved by hand. I mean, it's so much work to get that done. So flashing back to our Pete contains multitudes, Pete's a man of contradictions discussion from part one. Pete and the team came up with this idea of using, I think it's cachaza. Is that how you
maybe
say
cachaza?
Cachaza?
Not 100% sure.
Which is a byproduct of sugarcane as kind of the chief ingredient of the topsoil. You got to imagine there's a lot of this hanging around with our 330,000 tons of sugar being processed per year. But it's like this organic material. It's kind of like peat moss. And so they would mix it with the sand and the red dirt to create the topsoil that they needed. And then peat, again, we talked about it, tons of different grasses, variety of grasses. You can see that when you're down there, even though they just kind of redid the fairways and the tees and stuff. But you can still see like all the different texture and stuff that's going down at a place like this. So originally it was Bermuda in the fairways. I think it's Bahia and guinea grass in the rough, Tiff dwarf on the tees and greens. And on many holes, the fairways were painstakingly planted sprig by sprig, blade by blade by workers using a little point stick. Would love to know more on that.
Pointillist artwork.
Yeah, truly. Pete's very proud of this when it's done. He's very proud of the setting and the golf holes. He's got some strong words for this.
Yeah, speaking of his confidence, he just went ahead and compared it to Pebble Beach in the book. He kind of went with many people are saying treatment a little bit in the way that he sourced these quotes. I don't think he had any specific quotes from particular players, but he said, amateurs and professionals compare it favorably with another great seaside course such as Pebble, et cetera, et cetera. I'm curious, you guys having
strong man,
just been there, what your thoughts are on that comp.
It's not laughable, man.
No, it's not.
It's really cool. It's really, really cool. I love that he writes in the book. He says, Pebble may have several holes along the sea, but only Teeth of the Dog has 7 holes in the sea, which I think is pretty spot on. It's like you're playing, the ocean is right there. It is, it's intense.
Yeah. You're almost playing on decks out into the ocean. It feels like you're, it is really, and with how rough the surf is, that's what's incredible. I was shocked by, I didn't realize how old it was when we went down there. This is really connected joining some dots for me, Deej, on with the resort. It reminded me a ton of Hilton Head.
Yeah.
And now it's like, so it was like the same year as Heritage. I'm like, that makes so much sense now.
Which is, I mean, I know it can get a little punchable when you start getting too deep into the golf courses are works of art conversation. But truly, man, when you start thinking about it like that and you start thinking about influences, and that's why I love like what you said about Crooked Stick, Charlie, in the first episode, is when you have a golf course that even on one course, when you're building it over a long enough stretch of time, it's like you're going to see multiple influences even inside of the same course. Like I love that stuff. All right, moving on. Pete, we talked about some of the holes on the ocean. Pete definitely incurred the wrath of our guy, Mr. Carta, at one point, causing the sugar magnet to attack him with a 2x4. Pete's words, maybe an exaggeration there. And the reason was that essentially Pete had decided to move the location of the 8th green to be flush with the ocean, which ordinarily would be great, but he decided to do this just prior to the 1974 World Amateur Team Championship coming down at little whiffs of Harbor Town, like, oh shit, the players are coming. We gotta be done. Yeah, we gotta get out of this bunker. The players are coming right now. So I think Mr. Carter was understandably pretty pissed that Pete took it upon himself to move a green right before this big tournament that was going to kind of showcase the golf course to the golf world. But Pete promised that the green would be done and playable before the tournament. He got it done as he always did. The 1974 World Amateur Team Championship brought some big names down to teeth for the first time. George Burns, Curtis Strange, Gary Koch, Jerry Pate, who's going to end up being, his life's going to be intertwined with Pete's shortly. We talked about the PTI index. Pete might be the father of the PTI index.
I think he might be.
Was bucking during this tournament. 3 of the 590 rounds were under par.
Hell yeah.
Windy conditions, closing stretch earns the moniker Reload Alley. I mean, guys are just pumping balls into the ocean. Gary Koch, very visceral quote here, said, this course will come out of nowhere. It will throw you down and stomp on your head.
Oh yeah.
Which is what happened to me.
I can relate.
Can confirm
that quote. Hell yeah.
Can confirm. And again, like we heard last time, I think you could kind of just imagine Pete's kind of buzzing when he reads these comments.
Yeah, look at these guys. They stick, huh?
And especially it's right around the same time as Harbor Town. So spoiler alert, over the next hour and a half here, we're going to hear some pros that were not so fond of Pete's work. You got to almost wonder if, we talked about kind of you don't know where the edge is until you find it, right? I kind of wonder how much of this is, you can almost kind of feel Pete sneaking up to the edge, especially with big name players, right? Because he's got Harbor Town, but it's kind of got some jack protection. There's nothing crazy about Harbor Town, right? Like it's small greens and it's corridors, but it's not goofy. This is intense, right? This is much more kind of a maximal feeling. And, obviously we will take that to Sawgrass and PGA West and Kiowa. There'll be all kinds of other things that end up happening on much bigger scales, and you can kind of feel him start to hit the wall and say as much. But here, I think he's probably like a little bit, oh hell yeah, man, this is what I'm going for.
Well, you also got, I said this in our Casa de Campo video, but test it out here. This feels like the first destination golf resort to me. Like truly, I know you could argue Pebble Beach is that, but there was already development there. Like to go and build something like Bandon in the middle of nowhere, and now this is a tried and true strategy that's worked. But the fact that this was done in 1969, and then it almost, I don't want to say it went away, because you could give me some other examples in the 80s and 90s, but it came back with a vengeance like 50 years later or 40 years later.
Right.
And so I think there's something to, he has to wow people if they're going to travel that far. And I'm sure it's not an easy journey back then to get there, right? It's not like it is, it's pretty easy to get there now. It's a little bit more developed, but I'm sure it was a hassle to get down there
at least
in 1970.
At least you could land on the 18th fairway, on that runway.
Yeah, but even then, I mean, how much like Randy hates small planes. Think about that.
Sure.
Like,
no, I'm kidding. Yes, it would be incredible. Charlie, how did the recreational golfers handle this?
They felt similarly to Mr. Gary Koch in the sense of getting thrown down and having their head stomped on. There was one bald-headed gentleman from New York, as Pete describes him, who
unnecessary detail.
Just this guy who slept with his Timberwolves and this balding guy,
this guy
and
was so bald.
This cagey lady. Yeah. You just throwing these little pokes just to make you so curious about how much he knew about these characters or what was going on outside of what made it into the book. So the balding New Yorker was scheduled to stay at Teeth for 3 days, and he ended up staying longer. The reason that he stayed longer is because he could not hit any of the greens on the par threes in regulation. Just couldn't do it. He was just absolutely pissed. The golf director, Danny Present, asked Mr. New Yorker how long he might stay, and the guy said, "I'm not going to leave this bleeping course until I hit one of those bleeping damn par threes with my first shot." 6 days later, finally he got a 6-iron 141 yards into the air onto the back edge of the 13th. He was sunburned, blistered, too weary to celebrate. He went straight for the hotel without even getting his ball off the green on the 13th.
Hell yeah.
He's playing 36 a day as well for 6 straight days, just trying to hit one par threes.
13 is probably the hardest one out there.
Right?
I mean,
exactly.
That's the inland one. That's something.
Neil, I think you're going to like this based on our experience. Well, actually, I felt this way more than you did. You played pretty good on the links course, but due to the success, Teeth of the Dog turned into a pretty big success. And so Pete was asked to build another course on adjacent land right next to Teeth. And so he put his protege, Lee Schmidt, in charge. This would end up becoming the links course, which we also played. Lee designed the routing. He staked out the golf course. He cleared all the corridors. Got through all this thick grass, the jungle conditions. And after completing all of these tasks, he flew to Miami en route to Indiana because he was getting married. And he put Pete in charge while he was away. He said, I did everything you asked. Just go ahead and keep pushing.
Grass him up, baby.
Yeah, that's right. And so 10 days later, Lee Schmidt gets married. He comes back to the DR where he's going to do his honeymoon and then get back to work. And he asks Pete, how things are going on the links. And Pete's answer, quote, drained every bit of color from his face. Pete said, I only changed one thing. I kind of reversed everything. Where you had the greens, I put the tees and vice versa. And with that, Pete said, I ambled to my plane, leaving poor bewildered Lee to begin his honeymoon. So not only are we
what a sicko.
Yeah. So not only are we enjoying torturing the world's best amateurs, I think he's starting to really embrace his
he's hot right now.
He's
hot. It took a while to get going, but now it's like the work won't stop coming.
Yes, exactly right.
I don't think he cooled off until he was in his early 90s.
Yeah.
God. And that just seems like that's kind of how it seemed to go for all these architects, even the modern ones, man. I mean, once you become a brand name, it's like, I don't know how they all do it. I don't know how they keep up with it with all the travel and stuff.
We should have mentioned this in case it's not in there later, but the naming of the golf course, Teeth of the Dog, comes from that famous rock that you see all over the golf course, kind of like this porous type of gray rock that, Pete was asking, what is that called? And the locals said it in Spanish, and it translates to Teeth of the Dog. And they said, oh, well, it's a great name for the golf course. We're gonna have a harder time naming some of these other golf courses, but
Diente del Perro.
Yeah, that one they were down with.
As I've said on the record, coolest name in the top 100.
Totally agree.
It's not even close. Ever since I was a kid, I was like, what is that course?
Yes.
I got to see that at some point.
Totally. Hard to talk about Casa de Campo without mentioning our guy Gilles Gagnon, who, is truly, man, the word legend, I think, gets thrown around a lot. Gilles is a legend. He is a 78-year-old little guy from Montreal who we were so lucky to meet.
Citizen of the world.
He truly citizen of the world. We got to meet him when we were down there. Great friend to Cody. You can hear all about this in the video that we did on Casa de Campo. But Gilles has worked at Casa de Campo for 45 years. He sales and marketing, director of golf. He's now director of golf emeritus.
He's not a hitter emeritus.
That's right. He was a good friend to Pete. Came to the Dominican Republic, pretty unorthodox credentials. He played college hockey at Michigan State, primarily spoke French until he got to Michigan. He had spent a little bit of time organizing some NCAA golf tournaments in Michigan, so he wasn't like totally without qualifications in golf, but very notable here. Neil, you kind of accidentally almost sunk our battleship in that first episode, but Gilles was not Pete's first choice for the director of golf. Do you know who was?
Bill Core?
Bill Core. Yeah. Bill Core was offered the position first, had some, mutual friends and connections. And,
what was Bill Core doing at the time? Was he already in like the design business?
He was working under a superintendent, right, Charlie? I know it's later in the script here. He comes back up again.
I don't have
that's all right.
A hard answer for that as to what he was doing then. Yeah.
We're going to get to it. I know he was working in Texas somewhere, but I can't remember for who or doing what.
Might have been Waterwood National.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't want to say it without being sure.
Yeah.
Come on, it's NLU podcast.
Yeah, let it rip. But fortunately for Gilles, and I would say fortunately for golf, because we got a lot of great golf courses out of the deal. Bill did not want to be stationed in one place, overseeing one golf program. He wanted to design and build golf courses, which he did a hell of a lot of, and he did a hell of a good job. So, worked out for everybody. But Charlie, what other Gilles stories did you come across?
As far as Gilles tells it, Gilles gave a TED talk. He's given another couple of interviews. So I pulled some of these stories from those places. there was a real meeting of the minds the first time that he and Pete got together. Pete was feeling him out a little bit, asking him what he knew about golf course maintenance, and Gilles started talking, started trying to answer the question, and Pete just got up and walked away and said, obviously you don't know shit, Gilles. So early on, in that relationship, Pete gave Gilles a list of things that he wanted him to do while Pete was headed out of town for a few weeks. Gave him the note, left town. Gilles unfortunately couldn't read anything that Pete had written on this note. If you've seen Pete's handwriting, I can't blame.
I
Gilles
thought maybe it was
one.
the language barrier too.
I'm sure that
No.
It's like bad handwriting in a different language. Like, fuck, man.
Pete said he couldn't draw, and I mean he could write, but like we have some sketches from his designs, and I have to squint pretty hard to figure out what's going on there. So Pete comes back 3 weeks later and was like, what the hell, Gilles? You didn't get anything done. And Gilles explained that he couldn't read the note, and Pete was like, all right, you better start walking with me and taking notes, man. Otherwise nothing's going to happen.
Pete talks about Gilles in his book a little bit, which is great. He says at one point, him and Alice, quote, spent a rather boring evening watching Gilles' daughter's ballet recital. And during the recital, Pete told Gilles, if you ever doubted my friendship, I proved it to you tonight by showing up for this, which is pretty great. And then the retort in 1998, when Pete was receiving an honorary doctorate at Purdue in Indiana. Gilles made the trip all the way to Indiana. Long ceremony, very drawn out, and this is some years later. Gilles goes up to him and says the same thing. If you ever doubted my friendship, Pete, I proved it to you today by attending this ceremony. So, two guys. I mean, truly, only got to meet Gilles, for a couple days, and obviously never got to meet Pete, but. Like, sign me up to be at that dinner table like forever. Sure. That's about as good as it probably gets.
I mean, and just in like such an awesome exotic setting. Just a couple of guys being dudes down there in the Dominican Republic in the 70s. You kidding me?
Not to mention Gilles' game. It's just the whole deal is like that's people. I think people talk about like what's the high watermark of golf. You could make a pretty good case, man, for like mid 70s hanging out at Casa de Campo with Pete and Gilles and the crew, and had to probably be pretty good, I would imagine. But detour we're going to skip here. I would, if anybody wants to do their own research on the current ownership of Casa de Campo, I would say, please knock yourself out. The Fanjul brothers, interesting, provocative stuff. Pete called them some spirited Florida businessmen.
Sanctioned by U.S. Customs and Border Protection for forced labor practices in 2022. All kinds of stuff going on there.
Cuban by birth, and
yes, exactly.
Cuban exiles.
Yes.
But hustlers for sure.
That's right.
Like, polluters of the Everglades,
like bootstrappers.
Yeah,
possible destroyers of worlds. Yeah,
sure.
Yeah,
sure.
We'll let you dig into that on your own time. But as far as kind of big picture Casa de Campo, there's 5 golf courses at the resort now. We talked about it in the video and in the podcast, just how big the place is. There's over 1,700 private villas inside of the resort, which I think again speaks to just how big it is. It's been called the Hamptons of the Dominican Republic. I think that's a pretty accurate description. The Dominican designer, Oscar de la Renta, famously lived there, had a house right behind the 15th tee. He was the guy that used to supply Pete with huge quantities of khaki pants, which is a great detail. Pete said in his book that play was often held up on the 15th as players paused to watch Oscar's voluptuous model sunbathing by his pool. Shout out to Wolfie in Argentina. I know they had a situation kind of like that in PA. The Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue was photographed there in 1971. We talked about this in the video, but a lot of celebrities hanging out at Casa de Campo. Michael Jordan, Ray Allen gets mentioned by Gilles. He gets name checked by Gilles. Conor McGregor.
Hey, we ran into Ray Allen too.
We saw him at Shelter Harbor. Remember that? That was one of my best golf memories ever. Miguel Angel Jimenez, we saw him when we were down there at Casa de Campo. He was down at the short game area.
Oh my God, I forgot about that. We were right next to him on the range.
Yeah.
His whole warm up. It was crazy.
Sean Connery, James Bond used to hang out down there. Jill said,
and just like tons of presidents too. I mean, the place is like dialed for heads of state. Lots of layers of security there. I was talking to Cody about that. I was like, So this place security is like, oh, they got it down here. Like it's a fortress if they want it to be.
It is a secure location. That is for sure. Bill Clinton used to go down there. George W. Bush, Georgia H.W. Bush. Jill's not impressed by his golf game. He's not a good ball striker. Might have got his head stepped on.
I think he may have like walked by a guy sitting on his back porch, and Jill's was like, it was like Bill Clinton's college roommate. He's just like hanging out down. I was like, oh, he's like, yeah, he's been, he's that guy's, he's tenured.
Yeah. Michael Bloomberg had a house down there.
Yeah.
Herb Kohler had a house down there, which we're gonna hear about. Famously, Drake started from the bottom video featuring Cody. Took place down there. So I mean, it's the center of the maze in a very specific type of maze, I would say. But I mean, this was up there, man. This was Pete's baby. He was asked in a Q&A in 2009. I think this was in Forbes. If he had a favorite among the courses he designed. He said, I've always liked Teeth of the Dog in the Dominican Republic. When we started down there wasn't a paved road within 35 miles of the property. There was nothing there, no trees. Now there are 50,000 people who have jobs because of the course and the resort, and 3,000 homes and an airport, and former presidents play there. And I like the course too. That's a guy. It's a guy having a pretty big impact on a region down there. And he's pretty beloved down there as well, as we're going to hear shortly. But I think the other thing that's notable, much like Cricket Stick that we talked about in the first episode, Pete and Alice had a house down there as well, Charlie.
They did indeed. And to call it a house might be a little bit of a misnomer, as it turns out. Bobby Weed, who we mentioned in the last episode, who I spent a day with in Jacksonville, Ponte Vedra area, spent some time 17 years, I think, working with Pete on a number of different courses. And he told a story. I've got some tape from us talking in the car about this little compound that Pete put together at Casa de Campo.
Well, there's some really great Dominican Pete stories about his place down there and going down there at Casa de Campo. Yeah, a lot of great stories there.
Would you indulge me with one?
Sure. Well, they built this. He had a lot on the right of hole number 7, par 3. I always told the maintenance guys to throw all the trash from the golf course storms on his lot. They'd throw cobble and rock and trees and palm fronds and everything. But one day he decided to build a house. And he said, we're going to build a house, and we're just going to use all the rubble all the stuff that we've collected and everything.
Okay.
So they built this house out of all native materials from off the golf course and stuff. Trees, no nails, thatch roof, rock walls, coral rock walls, tree limbs for beams. Very, very Dominican, very cool. It had 5 little huts, all connected by little walkways. It was really very, very, very Dominican. There was a guy that had a lot beside Pete. He was from Italy, some Italian guy that only came once or twice a year. But he always walked around and said, yeah, one of the world's greatest architects, Pete Dye, he's got the lot. We're neighbors. Yeah. He's going to build, and we're neighbors. We're going to be neighbors. I've got the lot right beside him. He had this big Italian mausoleum-looking home, and he came in town after Pete had built his house. He got in at night, late at night, so he got up the next morning, and he was going to go out back and jump in his pool. And the story was he got up and walked out back to jump in his pool and looked out and saw Pete's house. And his comment was, oh my God, the son of a bitch built 5 orange juice stands. And Pete hooked up the irrigation system into his house from the golf course. He hooked up the golf course irrigation system into his house for his plumbing. And had a little too much pressure. And they flushed the toilet, and the toilet just blew off it just completely just blew up into the air. 120 pounds of pressure.
Wow.
And Alice said they turned the shower on, and he said it would not only take the hair off your skin, it would take the skin off your bones, off your arms. But he was that's just how eccentric he was. He was very practical, but at the same time, he was just incredibly eccentric. And the guys would be going around spraying the golf course. He'd whistle for him to come over, and the guy on the sprayer would come over, and he'd get the hand boom, and he'd take the hand boom. They were spraying for bugs or something for insecticide. It was insecticide, and he would get the handgun off the spray tank and go spray the thatch roof and everything for bugs and everything in the house. He'd just go spray this thing all over the house. I mean, it was crazy.
Oh my God. I did not know any of that.
Yeah. So need to find some photos of this house, this compound, the lemonades, the orange juice stands. But yeah, that, and I think Bobby Weed's accent and Bobby Weed's general kind of disposition is maybe
like,
just
why would
as
you
good as
do
it
that?
gets.
His answer's probably because it's sick, man. Trash to treasure.
Yeah, I've been sitting on the toilet story for a couple months, just laughing about that one. How good that is, just blowing the toilet off the nuts. It's good stuff, man.
It's truly something I would do. I'm like, oh yeah, let's just hook it up to the irrigation. That makes sense. I mean,
right
it makes
there.
sense. Yeah, it's like,
but you can't deny it did work. I mean, it worked.
It's like it
just
technically
was too-
makes sense.
it
You
was
just
too
didn't think
good.
it through.
Yeah, it just worked too well. That was kind of the problem.
God,
Yeah.
It's right back to the Country Club of Indianapolis. Just like a little more chemicals. Let's just keep the good times rolling. Let's go until we break it.
Charlie, wasn't there a story of one of the other guys going down and staying in the DR with Pete?
Yeah, so I talked to Bob Patton, who's the director of golf at Long Cove. Bit of foreshadowing there. And Pete was known to invite his friends down to stay at his 5 orange juice stands and hang out for a few days. And a number of folks took him up on it and said wonderful things. They had a great time there. Pete was revered by the locals as soon as they found out that Bob was traveling with Mr. Dye. He said that the tone of his caddies completely changed. Like, oh my gosh, you're friends with Senor Dye or Mr. Dye. Like that's a pretty big deal. We've heard about Pete being an early riser. He's going to beat you to the job site, but he may not be staying up all night, or he may not have been, according to Bob Patton.
We were staying with him at his compound in Casa de Campo. We were having dinner, and he had a little area outside where we ate all your meals, breakfast, lunch, dinner. You ate in this little cabana that was sitting kind of in the backyard. And we had dinner, and it wasn't that late. I mean, I don't know what time it was, but it wasn't late. And he gets up from the table, and he comes back, and he's got this cuckoo clock. It's like literally like a chicken in a clock, and he held it and he winds it up and it starts clucking and clucking, and he goes, "You know what that means? It means it's time for everybody to go to bed. Get out of here."
He did like to go to bed early, I know.
Yeah.
Wow, what a move for the house guest. Not subtle.
Oh yeah, no, it's just that's it. That was it.
Oh God, I love that. You know what this
Night.
little bird means? It means go the fuck to sleep. Everybody get out of here.
God, he's even more of my kind of guy. Irish exiter, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Irish host kind of like, don't say goodbye. Get out of here.
Yeah, you mentioned how revered he was down there. Bob would go on and say he was basically like a god down there to a lot of the locals for transforming the place. But I think the other thing too is like the title of the book, Neil, you'll know this from being down there. The "Bury Me in a Pot Bunker" it's a literal request. He's when he passed away in 2020, I believe it was,
Yep.
his ashes were scattered down there at Teeth of the Dog in an undisclosed pot bunker. And Jill's Herb Kohler and his wife, PB Dye and his wife, and a few others were in attendance. So Neil, that's Teeth of the Dog. Hopefully filling in some blanks from when we were down there.
Yes.
The next golf course that we're going to talk about, I'm going to lead with some quotes here about our next golf course. Tom Watson called the course, quote, a joke, a real joke. Needs some major changes before it can ever be called fair. Ben Crenshaw said this is Star Wars golf designed by Darth Vader. Another unidentified player said the 17th hole was a ridiculous piece of shit, reminiscent of some sort of putt-putt carnival course. J.C. Sneed famously said that Pete had, quote, ruined a perfectly good swamp. Said the course was 90% horse manure and 10% luck. Jack Nicklaus came, he stopped short of any personal attacks on his guy Pete. Said, I've never been very good at stopping a 5-iron on the hood of a car. And Pete said the pros came very close to killing me. We are, of course, talking about the stadium course at TPC Sawgrass.
God, I thought you were going to say Kiowa.
We are not there yet. We are talking about the Sawgrass, which opened in 1982. A song comp here. Here's what Charlie's asking for. The arrival of a new direction among the body of work, arena rock, music made for a huge audience, controversial at first, ultimately revered for what it is. I read the Stephen Hayden book about Bruce Springsteen last year, 2 years ago. Born in the USA comes to mind. Very misunderstood, mischaracterized song, coming right off of Nebraska, kind of a stripped down, hands in the dirt type of record into just let's see if we can fill up some stadiums.
You know what I hit you with? Coldplay.
Okay.
Some good early stuff that critics raved about, and then just kind of like a victim of their own success, kind of like, oh man, these guys are high on their own supply. It's just too much.
Sure.
And then the arena stuff. That's what I'd hit you with.
Charlie, you got anything?
No, I'm fine. I'm fine with those takes. I spent so much time with Mr. Dye here. I just delighted in the idea, despite my career and background in music. I enjoyed writing these prompts, and just going to leave it to the people to select.
And listen, kind of similar to TPC, Coldplay comes on now.
For sure.
Fix You comes on. I'm not going to lie to you. I'm like, oh, this is kind of a banger.
Forget it.
Don't tell anybody.
Forget it. But also maybe got a little too polished in the recent iterations. Maybe could use a little return to its roots. I would listen to that.
That's good.
Well, of course, the story of TPC Sawgrass begins with Dean Beeman. Dean is now 88 years old, still doing great. Charlie got to spend some good time with him when he was down in Jacksonville. But quick walk through.
Hell yeah, Charlie! God, he's like one of the unsung hitters of golf.
Totally agree. Yeah. Shout out to Adam Shupak's book, I believe, Golf's Driving Force, about Beeman. Quick run through his CV. Yet another successful insurance executive, which is great. Good player in his own right, certainly. Won the US Am twice. Won the British Am once. Always a good feather in the cap. American going over and winning the British Am. Won on the PGA Tour 4 times after turning pro in 1967. He was on a winning Walker Cup team, and he was the second commissioner of the PGA Tour, serving for 20 years, 20 formative years, 20 big years, 1974 to 1994. Overall, just kind of a killer, man. A guy who I think had the respect of the players, was a player himself, but also like
really built a tour.
Great business mind who kind of
built the foundation.
Yeah, exactly. Charlie, anything else that you kind of took away from spending some time with him?
This was early in my reporting on the project, and I spoke with Dean and Davis Love III back to back, and I just kept pressing Dean, like, hey, tell me about Pete and Alice off the course. Like, what do you guys chat about when you had dinner, when you weren't working? And Dean, who's 88 now, as you mentioned, was like, basically, man, I was busy running shit. Like, there was no socializing. I was like, all right, fair enough.
He does seem like an intense guy.
Fair enough, Mr. Beeman. Okay, but he had a lot of great things to say about Pete and their working relationship, some of which we'll hear.
Which is also funny, just a quick sidebar, but in comparison to some of the other, quote unquote owners, right? Like Dean's kind of the quote unquote owner that Pete's working for here. The group is the PGA Tour, but it's just very different compared to some of the others who are just like, hey man, can I walk next to you as you lay out the holes? What can I do? Can I get on a dozer? It's just very different that Pete came into this, or I'm sorry, Dean came into this and was he knew exactly what he wanted, right? Like that was almost, that was one of the differentiating points, was to the degree that he was like, I want as many holes that go left to right as go right to left. Stadium golf was the other big thing, right? I mean, everybody kind of knows about this, like building a golf course to host a tournament, building a golf course to host patrons, making sure that people could see, building mounding, all of that stuff was kind of this vision that Dean had. He went to New York, and Joe Dye has come up like a million times, but he was
USGA
the
president,
director of the USGA at the time, and Dean basically tried to convince him, which is kind of funny to, as we start talking about like the major championships and maybe these people just need to own their own golf courses type of situation. He tried to go to the USGA and said, the USGA should build a series of stadium courses to hold their championships. You can do whatever you want. He said Joe was interested for about a minute and a half, and that was it. The concept of stadium golf got buried until I had the challenge of developing the Players' Championship. And so a lot of people know this story, I think, but Dean ended up acquiring the 415 acres that Sawgrass now sits on. He paid $1 for it from the Fletcher brothers, famously, who were developers in the Jacksonville area who owned a bunch of the surrounding land. And they ended up selling that acreage for nothing to Dean, because Dean essentially convinced them, trust me, if we put a world-class golf course on it and we host a big tournament, all your other land is about to get infinitely more valuable, which is exactly what happened. So we mentioned this in the last episode, but Pete kind of became Pete. He became famous to Dean. He got on Dean's radar after designing Harbor Town and the great reception that golf course got. It became very clear, and Charlie, you mentioned this in the last episode, but he almost, to his, not detriment necessarily, but almost got a little micro pigeonholed as like, oh, that guy can make something out of nothing. You got shit land, like you need to get Pete Dye. He can come in there and just totally revamp it, which is it's what they had here. I mean, it was not great. It was a swamp, as our guy JC Sneed said, but. Like I said, I think what was novel about the relationship was Dean was a ball knower, right? I mean, Pete's a player, Dean's a player. I don't think Pete necessarily had worked with a ton of other people who were like, I know exactly what I want. I know what golf fans need. I know what players are expecting to see. And he just had like a very clear vision of what he wanted.
Absolutely. Yeah. And one other little detail, Neil, that I didn't know before this about the story of where Dean's epiphany or revelation for the stadium idea came from was that the biggest money-making merch item at a previous tournament he hosted was a periscope. And I'm not talking like binoculars. I mean, these like tall periscopes.
Yeah, the boxes.
Yeah.
Yes. That's like an iconic thing from old.
Exactly.
I don't know, just golf stuff. Yeah, what a time capsule item that is.
Right.
Totally. These old photos are terrific. And so that was his simple, what if we build some big ass mounds so that people don't need to buy as many periscopes? What if we create some areas of activity so that folks don't have to walk miles and miles to see golf on different holes? Sounds obvious in hindsight, but yeah, that was his like, okay, let's go do it. And I also love the linearity of Pete Dye and Jack become friends playing together. Jack walks with Pete at the golf club in Ohio. They have some banter. They trade some suggestions. Jack then brings Pete in with Charles Frazier at Sea Pines for Harbor Town. One leads to the next. Dean Beeman sees Harbor Town, falls in love with it. Pete becomes famous to him. He calls him for Sawgrass. It's just this very clear chain of jobs leading to the next jobs.
Yeah.
Pete's all in on this stadium idea, totally grasps it. He throws out Turnberry as a good example of like, that's the types of dunes that we're building. I understand what it would be like to have spectators up on top of those dunes, and great, we'll just do that here. But we're just going to turn it up to 11, which if you've been out to Sawgrass, I mean, that's what it is. It doesn't feel natural, but it feels functional. And so Pete sketched out the routing on the back of a placemat that he liked. But as we mentioned in the last episode, Dean made him submit a full set of plans to appease the bankers. Charlie, this was famously the story when they walked out of the meeting and Pete said, you can go ahead and put those plans away. We're good. We're just going to build this thing in the dirt. So there wasn't a lot of dirt to start with. Like we said, it was a pretty, quote, impenetrable, swampy jungle. Which God sounds unfun to just wade through all day.
With some gnarly alligators and snakes and all kinds of stuff. And like, it's Florida on the coast. Like, Not like the water table's pretty shallow. It's not like you could dig down that far.
100%. Pete said on that note, we must have killed 60 or 70 rattlesnakes, all of them 5 or 6 inches around. And he said, since rattlesnakes live in pairs, the crew knew that if they killed one, there was another one that was hanging out. So it's just missed me with all of that. It was. I love this quote that you found, Charlie, from this is Peter Dobenreiner, I believe, from Golf Doberreiner from Golf Digest. Summed up Dean Beeman's request for Pete Dye. He said, quote, "Behold this tract of jungle swamp, pray turn it into the world's first golf stadium." We used to write things in this country.
We used to build things.
Yeah. But, follow this again under something that might not happen exactly the same way in 2026 because of, environmental regulations. But turning this just complete swamp into golf, I think carries some complexity and some challenge with it.
Yeah, this bit kind of reminded me of a Dutch person who told me once that the canals in Amsterdam are like 1/3 water, 1/3 bicycles, and 1/3 muck. And they had some proper muck to deal with at Sawgrass, 12 to 18 inches of organic material, if you will, that they had to remove to build the holes. And so they pulled that out. They built the lakes and ended up with all of this stuff to build the mounds. And part of that whole process, they used an old school method to clear vegetation that was detailed by Pete himself in this excellent interview that he did with Eric Anders Lang in 2012 that we referenced in episode 1. Eric has graciously agreed to let us play some of that. So we've got a clip here of Pete talking about this vegetation clearing.
During the building the golf course, there was a lot of rough area out there. And we didn't raise the fairways. The fairways are natural. They're pretty natural. And the greens are very low. Just the mounds are up. But I brought in all these goats to clean out the rough, and they did a wonderful job. They did it fine. And finally, we got the golf course open, and it still had the goats there. And one was called Prunes. And old Prunes was doing all right, but they finally went around and nosed a few of the ladies in the rear, in the back end a little bit. Didn't do too good. They didn't like that. And actually, the roof of the original clubhouse came down, and somehow Prunes could get on the edge of that roof and climb clear up the top. So after we had them out there for a while, and even though they were doing a good job of maintaining the rough area and keeping it cut down, but their interference with some of the players and climbing that roof, that was just too much for Dean, and we had to get rid of the goats.
It sounds like first of all, if you ever go to the Sawgrass Clubhouse, there's some good photos of the god-awful old clubhouse. Not that the new clubhouse is
like the ground level.
Yeah, the new clubhouse is kind of an eyesore in its own way. But the old one was this kind of like, just very weird retro. I don't even know what the architecture would be.
I know it's a very specific kind of architecture
though,
where like the roof, like they start at ground level or like 3 feet above it, and then the windows come out of the shingles. It's God, what would that?
I don't know.
Remind me of?
I don't know what that would be called, but there's some good photos of old Prunes up on the roof, and it sounded like maybe the Gators also got a taste for the goats.
I was going to say
as well. I think that's a pretty well worn story too. But if you're ever running around the Players Championship or you see someone with the goat logo, that's hence why that's the Players Club merchandise. That's why they have goats. Which, side note, we might have gone too far with the alternate logos, but we can maybe have that conversation at a different time. Alan McCurrick is the founder of a golf construction company that bears his name down in Jacksonville, and worked with Pete for 17 projects, a ton of projects during his time when Pete was alive. He was actually the one that was entrusted after they signed on to do White Oak, the very kind of secretive private golf course near Jacksonville. Pete was in failing health, and so Alan was the one that ended up doing a lot of that work. But when he was really, really young, he started working with Pete in 1980 on the stadium course at Sawgrass. Kept referring to Pete as the crazy gardener because Alan didn't know what a golf course architect was.
Yeah, these quotes come from, I'm pretty sure it was the Fried Egg video about Crooked Stick, where they end up talking about some other courses as well. And Alan tells a story when he was super young. He was raking out the third green at Sawgrass. They all had it, nice and tied up, really, really tied in, tight, clean. Pete came over, didn't like the way it looked, so we just backed a bulldozer, rode over the top of it, pushed it out, and said, all right, let's start over. Not the first time, not the last time you're hearing stories like this. If it ain't right, let's get it sorted.
Yeah, just not subtle with some of his feedback.
It's just not quite by tempo.
Yeah, exactly. Rushing and dragging. Sorry, Alan. Charlie, let's talk about 17.
Let's do it. We mentioned this in the Alice introduction in episode 1. Famously, it was her idea to make this island green. They started digging and digging and digging, and she's the one who deserves the credit for that idea. And it's better. Let's hear it from Pete rather than from me. I think that'll be a better source.
It all comes back to my bride of some 62 years. And Alice has played great golf all her life. She's won the North-South Amateur, and she won the Eastern Amateur, and she's won the state, and she won the Florida State Amateur and the Indiana State Amateur 11, 12 times. But anyhow, in a par 3, you always know where the tees are going to be. The tee is there for a par 3. So if you're on the back tee, you're a good player, you're playing here. And you're a modest player in the middle of the tee. And if you have ladies are playing, you got to have a ladies tee. So you know where they're coming from. So Alice, every time I work on a golf course, we talk about it, and she comes out and says, well, where is Mary Smith going to play this hole? How is she going to play this hole? It's always Mary Smith, or some lady 90 years old, or 80 years old, or 70, or 60, or 5, or whatever it is, whatever age. But anyhow, and then she always feels that the par 3s ought to be the strongest, because she knows she can get the ladies' tee in a certain position that they have a fighting chance to play that hole. So we were down in Jacksonville, and it was a low area. Well, you're going to see Dean. I don't want to call it a swamp, but anyhow, it was a swamp, and it didn't have much sand. And I was looking for sand every place I went out there. And finally, we were over there where the 17th hole par 3 was going. We started digging, and then we hit sand. So I kept digging and digging and digging and digging. And finally, instead of having a golf hole, I just had a hole in the ground about 30, 40 feet deep where I'd taken out all the sand. So I got to build a golf hole. I don't have one. And Alice came out there, and she looked at it, and she said, what are you going to do here? And I said, I don't know. I got to go get some junk dirt and put back in here and fill this thing up. She said, well, why don't you just build an island green and make it a real short par 3? And I said, well, what do you mean, just an island green? Well, I said, you can just go out there and bulkhead and bring the bad dirt up to ground level and then build a green on top of it. And I said, well, that's crazy. So more I got to thinking about it. And then I came back, and financially it was the least expensive thing to do to start with. So the from the back tee, from the pros tee, it's only 135 yards. So they're hitting a wedge or a 9-iron or 8-iron, the most. And then off the side, the green was just oblong. I put the ladies' tees. They only had about, maybe 200 feet, 60, 70 yards to carry to get the green. So that's where she wanted the tee, so we did. And the amazing thing about it, the club professional who was there, he could go out there and put 100 golf balls down and hit 100 golf balls onto that green. Now, when they had the tournament, and here the tournament is, and those guys got out there and they would take a 9-iron, and the green is 5,000 square feet in diameter. It's plenty big. It's not just a postage stamp. And they would stand out there with a 9-iron or a wedge and miss that green. I couldn't understand it. I really had no wild idea. I thought everybody would hit that green. And they put swings on it like you've never seen those people swing on that particular hole.
I mean, that's it, right? There's so much packed in there. The utilitarianism.
Thinking about how deep the lake is,
right? Exactly.
Maybe some creatures swimming.
Who knows? But it's utilitarian. It's economical. It's visually striking. I love the thing about the women's tee boxes, right? Even if you think about how that green sits, right? Like if you're playing the forward tees, you're way up on that left side. The bunker's way on the right side of the green, never going to come into play. It's just he's making it as easy as possible for a wild, insane force carry like that. It's just, I don't know. I can't hear that story enough times. I don't think. And I think coincidentally, what's funny is at first he didn't think it was going to be difficult enough, as you can kind of hear in his voice when he's talking to Eric there. And so he had the back portion of the green actually sloping towards the water as well, the same way that the front portion slopes towards the water. And Alice, I think, was also the one that gave him a reality check on that. And she said she was imagining that the TV announcers would be having to inform the audiences that the play was being held up because 25 threesomes were waiting on the tee for the lead player to keep his ball on the green. So he ended up softening that, but.
Pampered fucks.
That's right.
Yeah.
Speaking of pampered fucks, so we had the golf course opens, and we have the 1982 players. Right, is the first golf tournament. You heard all the quotes on the start of this. Neil, can you guess what the winning score was at the 1982 players?
I'm gonna say -3.
-8. I don't know what all these guys are bitching about. Yeah,
I know. I was thinking it'd be like pretty close to par if they're all upset.
Right. Jerry Pate, of course, your winner at 8 under, played an orange ball, shot 67 in the final round, hit his second shot on 18 with a 5-iron to just a few feet, knew he had iced the tournament. He's walking up the fairway, camera in his face. He's a Pete Dye will go for a swim today. Of course, that famous clip. Dean Beeman just happened to be standing there at the back of the green as well. So Jerry Pate threw old Pete Dye in the lake. He threw Dean Beeman in the lake, and then he jumps, he kind of belly flops, sort of swan dives into the lake himself. Just the biggest commercial ever for this place. I mean, what a spectacle, right? That story kind of writes itself. The hardest course on earth, and the player just threw the architect in the water. I mean, it's good stuff. The quote I hadn't heard before that I love. One of the media members asked Jerry afterwards if he had gotten the winner's check wet when he jumped in the lake. He said, "No, I want to keep that dry so I can give it to Pete to help for redoing the greens." It was good stuff. But they would famously soften the greens quite a bit at Sawgrass. I think that becomes a theme with a lot of these golf courses. Green speeds speed up. Things are just a little too turned up. So I don't know if, I'm skipping all around, Charlie, here, but I don't know if that's kind of part of the restoration plans, is to add a little bit more of that into the greens.
So the restoration plans, as far as I understand it, Scott Sherman gave a good interview with Garrett Morrison about this, and then I talked to Davis Love III about it. Their plans are to go back to some of the ruggedness of the features from 1989 is their target, which I think is really interesting. So I think bunkers and green complexes, it has become a bit more conditioning wise and pristine wise, like Augusta in Florida, compared to Pete's original intention of what was, like a proper, rougher, more rugged, swampy setup. Some of these old photos of the course are just beautiful and wild and weird.
I think Dean kind of spoke to the green severity a little bit here too. I'll play this clip.
We opened the golf course in 1981. We didn't play until 82, so there was a lot of play on it for a year before the tournament. And during that period of time, I was concerned that it was maybe some areas were too severe. In that year's period of time, we changed a lot of things. And the really severe things we changed, but it was, everything is relative. When you're looking at how something very severe and you change it and it's not quite as severe, it might be okay, but for somebody else who's never even looked at it, it's a different perspective. So when the first tournament was here, we recognized that it was still a little too severe. And over time, that has been corrected. And the greens, as a matter of fact, today the greens are much, much less severe. And I would not call it a severe. The greens very severe today. And of course, we're playing on the greens that are a lot faster. So if they're too severe, it's unfair. So I think that it's a good balance today. It's taken a time to do that, and the players reacted negatively some at the beginning. But all that has been when you take severity out of the golf course, you smooth it out. I think things were a lot smoother today.
This is the first time I kind of alluded to it on the teeth of the dog stuff, but this is the first time I think Pete, at least in his book, writes, quote, the verbal assault against our new creation hit like a stake in my heart. I mean, I think this stuff kind of got to him a little bit.
He read the comments.
He did.
You can't be the kid forever, Deej.
That's right.
But to give him credit, he did miss on the right side.
Exactly.
We can always pull on the reins a little bit.
100%. But I think it's hard not to. It's hard not to look at this as like the point is to challenge the best players in the world, right? He's not building this isn't the golf club where you're having, member play all the time. Like it's to host
the assignment,
right? And so I know Tom Doak had some stuff that he kind of had written about this sort of phenomenon, Charlie.
Yeah, there's some nice long posts on GCA from Mr. Doak.
The Dokey, though.
One of those quotes is, Pete believed that the only way to really challenge elite players was to get under their skin, as we've been talking about. And he tried to do that every way he could think of. When players complained about something, he'd make a mental note to do more of that. Shout out to the Jack Nicklaus bunker at Carnoustie. When I was working on the plans for PGA West, Doak says, Pete shared a bunch of that knowledge with me, and the quote from Pete was, when you get those dudes thinking, the tour players, they're in trouble.
We want to test the 15th club. But John Bodenhammer said that to Solly and I at Shinnecock during the U.S. Open Media Day.
Exactly right.
Trying to test the 15th club in the bag. He pointed up here to his dome piece.
Pete was writing, and kind of in retrospect about the stadium course. He said, looking back, I realized the radical design of the players course was too new for the tour professionals. He was ahead of his game. He said they had never seen anything like it. They were displeased when a wayward bounce or unexpected roll off a green ruined what they felt was a perfectly hit shot. The fair police were out there in force. But with all that said, I mean, the fans obviously loved it. They loved the functionality of it. They loved the visuals of it. They loved the do or die of 17. They loved seeing somebody get thrown in the water. I mean, it's like they did have to soften it, but it was pretty clear they were onto something and have been really since.
There's this notion that comes up a lot on his green complexes that tour players might be accustomed to hitting the center of the green and being safe. Well, it's not so much the case here. You've got what Pete would call ball splitters. All these mounds. You got to, as Neil fans himself.
And that's Bobby Weed's probably talking to you all about ball splitters.
Yeah, Bobby Weed, Abe Wilson, one of Pete's shapers. You got to find the quadrants or the nooks and crannies where your ball is going to funnel to the right place. You can't just hit your short iron to the dead center and expect to have a good result. You got to be precise.
Let's keep it moving, should we? Let's move on to our next golf course, which is Long Cove. Neil, you've been to Long Cove, right?
I have, but this is in high school. Shout out to my guy Paul Connors, friend of mine. I used to go down to. He had a beach house in Hilton Head and played out there before you knew what you were playing. You know what I mean? It was like, hey, you want to play golf today? I was like, yeah, sure. Let's go. And so fucking hard. I mean, so hard. So it was like, July, we're down there in the summer, just getting smoked out, probably both, smoking out and just super humid and just like getting ejected on this golf course. And that was my first dose of like, when I talk about the full length hazards, it's like, oh man, you there's water all down the left and you just start a quick chloroform ball off. It's like, you're re-teeing, brother. There's just, it's just OB. It's so penal. It's crazy.
Your setups have just been impeccable, particularly the smoked out stuff, which is going to become very relevant. Let me start with this. This is from Ron Whitten, 2009 Golf Digest piece. He said, Long Cove on Hilton Head Island is a cherished Pete Dye design, number 78 on Golf Digest's America's Top 100 Greatest Golf Courses. If its well-heeled membership knew what went on behind the scenes during the course's creation, they'd fall out of their carts. We're going to get into some of those people and who they are. They are a group known as the Wrecking Crew. let's go ahead and put up a photo of
it's the boys
of the Wrecking Crew there. I think this
DJ, I might have christened them that, the Wrecking Crew, in homage to the rhythm section, the Los Angeles rhythm section. That just felt like the Wrecking Crew to me.
Okay, that's good to know. That's good to know, because I was when we were doing song comps, I was like, well, obviously it's got to be a Wrecking Crew song, right? So I had Good Vibrations,
Yes.
Beach Boys. I had Lawyers, Guns, and Money. I don't know if that was a Wrecking Crew song, but I think that's pretty in line with some of the vibes that were going on. But DJ regrets the error on the Wrecking Crew. Must credit CVK on that one. But why don't we start there, Charlie? Why don't we talk about who's in the as we're glossing them, the Wrecking Crew here, starting with Bobby Weed, who we've mentioned a couple times.
To use some musical terminology, the MD, the musical director of the Wrecking Crew, is Senior Weed. If you're watching this on YouTube, young Bobby is in the far right of this photo with just some nice, tight, fresh, curly hair, short shorts, probably 5-inch inseam on those shorts.
I mean, he's the only one that looks like he has his shit together.
Yeah, he looks put together.
The rest of these guys are the bad news bears, man.
He's our MD, man. He's keeping it together. Bobby looks relatively clean. Everybody else in the photo is just covered in dirt. Just, I don't know what this is an advertisement for, but I'm buying it, whatever it is.
Bobby would obviously go on very successful golf design career outside of his work with Pete. Worked on the Dyes Valley course at Sawgrass, along with Jerry Pate as well, I believe. Also designed Grove 23, Michael Jordan's course in Florida, Old Farm in Virginia. I think he renovated Timuquana as well. He's done a bunch of stuff. In the red shirt there and the off-color cap, you're going to see a very, very young, slender Tom Doak.
That's Doak?
I believe that's got to be Doak, right?
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah. He was on the crew here. Great tape we got to play from Bobby Weed about hiring Tom Doak.
I hired Tom Doak. Pete said, hire this kid. And I interviewed him, and I called Pete. I said, Pete, I'm not hiring him. I said, he's skinnier than I am. And I said, the no-see-ums and the bugs will just devour him. He said, you hire that little son of a bitch. I'm tired of him writing me letters. He said, put him out there and tell him to pick up sticks all summer. And that's exactly what he did.
Oh, it's just great.
That's so sick.
It's great stuff. Great stuff. Tom Doak needs no introduction.
God, just picturing Doak as the new guy.
It's great, right?
Go pick up the sticks, would you? Okay.
Everybody came from somewhere, you know?
That's awesome.
It's great.
God, I can't believe that's Doak. Now, I mean, definitely. That's got to be him.
PB Dye, also on the crew, Pete's son.
I've got some good tape from former Golf Digest architecture editor Ron Witten, with whom I had a terrific conversation on a number of Pete-related topics, talking about PB and talking about this Long Cove crew a little bit.
Everybody told me the story of PB chasing people around on the bulldozer, knocking over palm trees as he was clearing out them, but he just kind of, it was like they were standing there and suddenly he burst out of the forest and they'd run for their lives. I think I wrote it was Animal House, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct, yep.
This club that very kind of discreet, under the radar, expensive venue for people my age and older, they would be aghast if they heard what went into creating that golf course. But that's part of its lore. That's part of what makes it such a distinctive course in my way of thinking. Everything there was, it was one of those courses where it wasn't its great piece of property. There was a highway right next to it, and so Pete built this big berm to block that, and then he wanted to get out to you couldn't get to the ocean, but you could get it to the river or the swamp or whatever you want to call it on the one end, and he was able to get out to that, and it was a housing development course, and it was kind of spread out, and what he ended up doing there was just remarkable, I think.
Bobby Weed, I think, sums up kind of, is maybe the quote of the episode here, but sums up the general vibe and how they built this place.
People say, how did y'all build such a great golf course here at Long Cove? And PB and I always commented, the pillars of sex, drugs, and rock and roll is what built that.
You hear Solly's laugh there. Shout out to you.
I gotta think they're just tearing up Hilton Head. So what is this, 770?
It's 82 that the course opens.
82. Okay.
Yeah,
right after Sawgrass.
Yeah, which I think is notable too, right? Because I've never been there, but just reading everything about it, and it sounds like there's some similar principles, right? Again, back to our artists kind of being in their certain eras, right? There's like two different almost competing things where he's got like a lot of the Sawgrass stuff that's going on at the same time. It's like, I don't want it to be quite exactly like that. It's not far away from Harbor Town. So it's like, well, it definitely has to be, totally different than that, right? So I know there was kind of this like push and pull, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I was initially hesitant to put another Hilton Head course on this list, but it's so different from Harbor Town, and I think that speaks to Pete didn't want to come back to Hilton Head and build something similar. He had evolved. This was years later after the late 60s of Harbor Town, so he needed to do something different. And there are some things that remind me of Sawgrass a little bit, maybe specifically the third hole, which is a dogleg left par 5 at Long Cove with a Neil Long hazard down the left.
Yes.
Less of a
Which
driver
hole is that?
3.
This is exactly the hole I'm thinking of, man. And I just remembered I went to see Paul in 2019. So I played in 2019 as well, or maybe 2018. It's still early days of NLU, so it's like I can remember courses a lot better now, but this hole stands out to me, and the Alps hole, the short, I think it's a short par 4, are just super striking. But what Bobby Weed said, like, it's right off the main drag in Hilton Head, kind of a nondescript entrance, super flat, and then there are a few holes out on I think it's the Intercoastal Waterway. So you get maybe 2 or 3 holes that are out by the water, but for the most part, it's a pretty uninteresting piece of land, but a very, very interesting and like intricate golf course. It's very difficult.
Yeah, I found that aside from the third hole, which was terrifyingly difficult at par the first 2, and then just ejected promptly on number 3, this outrageous green complex with a tucked pin pushed way up, like up next to this hazard. There are lots of holes on which you can run the ball up. 16 of the 18 greens, they're proud of this fact at Long Cove. You can play a low runner in there, which is not the case at every Pete Dye golf course, but it's something that distinguishes Long Cove.
There was a golf course on the property, just getting into some of the actual property itself. There was a golf course on the property back in the day that had been designed by Arnold Palmer and Frank Dwayne when the developers bought the property, but that was shut down for like 6 years, and it had, was kind of lay fallow in 1980. So I think they used some of those corridors and shook up some of the other stuff. But we talked briefly in the open, Charlie, about like this kind of construction vibe, right? And you have Tom Doak and you have Bobby Weed and these guys that are real golf sickos that are really deep into the game. But Bobby also subcontracted out like some of the other work to some people who are maybe not as high golf IQ.
Pete talks about this in the book, that Bobby hired this construction company that normally built roads. I don't know where this was on the course or at what stage in the process, but they gave this guy, this road builder, bulldozer operator, some instructions about carving a 3-foot deep waste bunker all the way down the left side of 10. I drove it in there, editor's note. And quote from the book is, "The gangly, bespectacled man chewing a huge wad of tobacco listened intently. He smiled and nodded in all the right places. 2 hours later, we walked over to the 10th hole, but the man hadn't moved." Shout out to Gilles not being able to read Pete's note. Pete asked him what the problem was, and this guy just hitched up his pants and said, "Look here, sir, is this to be a 2-lane or a 4-lane highway going through here?"
Which is fun. There's like a bunch of different examples of that where he would be like, if he wanted a green, he'd be like, "Hey, build me a house pad, over there on top of that ridge." If he wanted a bunker, he'd be like, "Oh, go dig me a foundation, over there." And that was kind of just how he'd get that, and then he would kind of massage the edges, and it seemed to work out okay. But I think natural question about some of the dynamic. I'll pull this photo down in a second if anybody's getting uncomfortable. Is
wrecking crew.
I mean, Alice like had to be around for all of this as well, right? I mean, what was the vibe with that?
She made her presence felt. Bobby told me that, quote, "We held our collective breath in anticipation of Alice's thumbs up or thumbs down reaction. Stiffen up, better make sure things are tight." One instance of the latter, thumbs down reaction, came on the 15th green when Alice made a site visit during shaping. Pete proudly showed her his masterpiece, as he put it in the book, and she told him that the inside shapes looked like a toilet bowl. So ego bruised. He admitted she was right. Didn't want to argue with his bride, and went back and he fixed the damn thing.
I think it is probably as good a place as any to slide this in. I feel like most casual golf fans don't know this. I certainly did not know this until you filled me in on this, Charlie. But Pete and Alice were both AA members as well. Just how did this kind of come up during your research?
This came up when Bobby and I were drinking a beer together. Yeah, I think Bobby ordered a beer and I asked, hey, did Pete and Alice drink? And he said that they did until they didn't, essentially. Right around the time he started working with them, which was, he met them at the Amelia Island Plantation, but I think Long Cove was his first proper job with them, was around the time they were going through AA. Pete writes about this, briefly mentions it in the book. He doesn't dwell on it by any stretch, but realized that might want to tighten things up, and he cut out the alcohol. There, I did get one story from Abe Wilson, the shaper who I mentioned at Whistling Straits, who's done a bunch of revisions there and worked on Pete's courses for a while. Abe said that he was having lunch with Pete one day. I think it was at French Lick, which is a course they built together, and Pete ordered, it might have been a cranberry soda or something like that, or cranberry and tonic, and took a sip, and he said, "There's goddamn whiskey in here." And the waiter had served him something accidentally, and he sent it back, and the waiter apologized, and Pete turned to Abe and said, "Tastes pretty damn good though." So Abe thought that might've been the last drink that Pete ever had.
That's probably right. As far as
I can't get PB coming out of the trees like he's on a Panzer out of my head. That we're skipping over that one too.
Good call
GI
out.
Bill.
Ron Whitten described him as the Belushi character of this crew.
Yeah.
I think that's going to do it for our wrecking crew photo. We'll take that down. You'd let me know if you need to put it back up, Neil. As far as the actual golf course at Long Cove, this one wasn't as much about dominating the landscape like Sawgrass as it was about, trying to integrate with the environment a little bit more, especially the greens. Pete was very, very big on the greens. Obviously, like every golf course architect, he said, if I'm known for one thing when I leave this earth, I hope people will say that Pete Dye knew how to build a set of first-class greens. He was much more conscious of increased green speeds at this point. Again, constant thread that we keep kind of coming back to here as technology is improving, as agronomy is improving. I think this becomes a much bigger deal. He talks about the stimp meter. If the stimp meter had been used back when Hogan won the Masters in like 1953, he was convinced it would have been like a 6 or a 7. That's how slow the greens used to be. So the downhill reading might have been like a 10, but uphill, there's no way it would have been more than like 4. He wrote, in my opinion, the decision to increase green speeds has definitely hurt the game of golf. We've talked about this. Greens are more severe, yada, yada, yada. But also, you cut things low and they're more susceptible to disease and they require more chemicals. They're more, the footprints become more evident. There's just a lot of things that come with these fast greens. I think this might be this might be my platform going in the next 20 years. It's just like, let's slow these greens down. What are we doing? Let's slow down the tempo. I stand with Pete on this.
Bring back slope.
It's exactly right. But so it kind of scaled these down a little bit compared to some of the other designs, which I think probably speaks to, this is my reading of it, but I mean, probably speaks to why the course is like 97% the same as it was when it opened, right? I mean, this wasn't one that they've had to tinker with quite as much. Yeah.
Another thing that I will join Pete on is going back to this more rustic, rugged look, if you will. The bones of the course are 97% the same, I think was a quote from Bob Patton, the director of golf there now. But when the course first went up, similar to Sawgrass, it was so natural and alive looking. And to be fair, there was no housing initially. And so the housing that surrounds it now changes the overall tapestry of what you're looking at. But it's become a much more perfectly manicured style of golf course, along with this, like, I don't want to say paint too broad of a brush that everybody's chasing Augusta, but there's an element of that a lot of people have talked to me about. And some people have different feelings about, like, should we like rough up the edges a little bit?
It's just like Pete back when Urbana, he wants it to look green.
That's right. Exactly. much like Alice Dye, a micro version here. If we're going to mention Long Cove, we need to talk about LaHunta Stovall. I think, Charlie, who is LaHunta Stovall?
LaHunta Stovall, by all accounts, was a menace. She was the woman who hit the first tee shot on number 10. It's one of the early members at Long Cove, and I've got some tape from Bob Patton, the director of golf there, talking about LaHunta.
And Alice was out here every day. I mean, Alice was another one who really deserves some credit for this golf course. She would come out at the end of the day and look at something that Pete had done, and she'd say, now how are the ladies going to play this? Or how are the high end, I mean, she would make points that hit home with Pete.
To that point, can you tell me who LaHunta Stovall was?
LaHunta Stovall, exactly. So 2 of our first members were Louie and LaHunta Stovall. In fact, they built the first house in Long Cove. And LaHunta was a good player. She had an interesting background. She was a ball of fire. She had kind of a gruff voice. She had one of those but she loved golf. She was a golf nut. I mean, she was a single-digit handicapper, I think, in those early years. And of course, Alice was a very good player, an accomplished player. And Alice and LaHunta kind of hit it off. And when they were out reviewing Pete's work at the end of the day or whatever, Alice would say, Pete, how is LaHunta going to play this hole? And that was kind of where that came from. We actually have a tournament at the club every year named after LaHunta Stovall.
Just circling back to our first episode, I think, of just good players, but learn to have the average player in mind at all turns. I love it. I also need to do a deeper dive on LaHunta Stovall based on some of the maybe off the record stories that were in there. I think moving on, this is another one, we're landing the plane here on Long Cove, but I'm not even gonna set it up. I think just play the Bob Patton story about the top 100 rankings and the committee and what happens when the committee gets involved.
We had a kind of a funny situation where we were top 100 golf course for years, and at some point we fell out of the top Golf Digest top 100. Course rankings are a source of frustration. It's it's an interesting thing, but some people take it way too seriously, and we dropped out of the top 100 at some point. And of course, like a lot of clubs do, when you have a problem, what do? You form a committee, because we have a lot of experts here, of course, on these things. And we formed a committee, and there were a couple of Type A strong personalities on the committee, and they created a list of things that they felt like we needed to do in order to get ourselves back into the top 100. We need to put a bunker on the left side of the first fairway. It's wide open over there, and there's no need to be straight, or just different things that they came up with. And I kept saying, guys, this is fine. You can do this, but you got to remember, it's Pete's golf course. It's not yours. So we're not doing anything without Pete's blessing. So they create this list, and then they asked me to get Pete. So I had to call Pete, and he happened to be. It was sometime soon after that. He happened to be in the area, and he said, "Okay, I'll come by." And that morning, I went and picked him up at the hotel, and I said, "Pete, okay, we're going to meet with this group of guys, and they're going to want to tell you that they want to do this or they want to do that." And he goes, "Okay, that's fine, no problem." And we were going to meet him out on the putting green right by the first tee, and we got out there, and he says, "Go to the first tee, don't go to them." He says, "I want them to come to me. I'm not going to them." So we go to the first tee, and they walk over. There's 5 or 6 guys, and the first thing out of his mouth as they come up was, "Guys, I've seen more great golf courses screwed up by committees than you can shake a stick at. Now, what do you want to talk to me about?" I mean, he set the tone immediately. And to his credit, he then said, he basically took the list and he kind of explained to him why he didn't think you would want to bunker down the left side of the first hole, because, he had his rationale, and he explained it. And he was good. He just wanted him to know right off the bat that he was the architect, and he was not going to let somebody fool with his design.
Just an all-time kind of alpha stuff in there. But
hone setting.
I think it speaks to a couple different things, as we've mentioned, the push and pull between the living document and the let's leave the good stuff alone. I think that's an important editing knife right? To have that eye and have that sharp kind of vision to, that Bob Patton was great. There's a bunch more stories I think maybe we'll put into a Nest podcast or something, but he talks about, Pete coming back in his 80s and crawling through bushes, and he was still like trying to improve the golf course later and later in life. He wasn't closed to improvements.
It's case by case.
Yeah, it's truly case by case. And again, we talked about it, he talked about it with Eric as well. There's more good tape that we'll put in that Nest pod about, what Donald Ross thought on Pinehurst. We talked about that in the first episode. And yeah, it's just, there's a lot of good stuff from Long Cove. That was one I did not know much about. And that certainly made me want to get down there. Folks, quick break in the action. This is maybe our first on-location ad read here to talk about our friends at Club Glove. Season 10 of Tour Sauce is underway here in the beautiful Highlands of Scotland. We're here in Royal Dornoch. And of course, the way that we got here is with our Club Glove travel kit. Club Glove #1 travel case in golf, built with ballistic nylon on the outside. I'm told this was originally developed to be used in military flak jackets. That's the level of protection that the golf clubs are going to deserve when you're coming to a place like this. You got to make sure they get there in one piece. Club Glove #1 travel case in golf is going to help out with that. Use code NLU if you want to get a free valuables pouch with your purchase over on clubglove.com. And if you like this one, a little no laying up custom job we got going on, maybe wait till the fall. It might have something dialed up very similar to this. Clubglove.com. Use code NLU if you want to get a free valuables pouch. Thank you to them for the support. And now let's get on with the program. All right, Neil, we're going to Tennessee. We're going to Ottawa, Tennessee, I believe is how you pronounce it. We're going to be talking about the honors course. Ottawa, I think. The pronunciation boys don't want to get involved. Song concept, this one's a little, a little bit of a tough one for reasons we'll get into, but harder, it's got to hold a strong ideological commitment, to the creative concept. It's hard. It's inaccessible. It's meant for a very specific audience. No commercial consideration whatsoever. Charlie, I don't know if you guys know this one. I threw out Murder Most Foul, that weird 17-minute Bob Dylan song about JFK. I think that's a pretty fair. I've never been to the honors course, but I think that's a pretty fair, pickup of the assignment there.
I've never been either, but I was thinking Tool.
That's a good one. God, I love Tool.
Just like hits hard, I mean, maybe honors feels a little more polished than Tool, but no commercial, no considerations.
That's true.
Right. If we're making a playlist of these 10 songs, you get to track 7 and this 17-minute JFK breakdown. It's like, what the hell happened?
Well, a lot of good stuff about the ethos of this golf course. I did not know a lot about this. Neil, do you know why it's called the honors course? I had no idea.
No clue.
So the developer of the golf course, a guy named Jack Lupton, said to Pete, quote, "Frankly, I am sick and tired of professionalism and its commercialism." Shout out to Randy. I think Randy be big on this concept. He said, "I want a course dedicated solely to the amateur golfer, molded in the tradition of Charles Blair McDonald, Donald Ross, and Alistair McKenzie." So this golf course was built to be in honor of the amateur game. Never to host a professional tournament. It's been a great friend to the amateur game, hosted a bunch of NCAAs, which we'll get into. And I had no idea that was the concept. Pete said that Jack Lupton, quote, rather commanded me to build a golf course for him. I think he was a very strong-willed guy. He didn't really elaborate on that exchange, but I think you can read into it a little bit. Neil, good one for your Atlanta connection here. Lupton was an heir to the Coca-Cola bottling fortune.
Okay.
His grandpa was the founder of Coke's largest bottler. Jack,
the other side of the business, the independents.
Exactly. Jack was he served in the Navy during World War II, spent a year in the Pacific. Him and Pete were about the same age. He inherited the family bottling business in 1977, quadrupled it by acquiring a bunch of other bottlers around the country. In 1986, he sold the company to Coca-Cola Enterprises for $4.2 billion in 2026 dollars. Sheesh. Yeah. Did a ton of philanthropy, obviously built the golf course. He was an Augusta member, a lifelong friend of Bob Jones. Don't call him Bobby. And I think another one of the things that Lupton was kind of most drawn to in this, you've heard it in the way he talks, you've heard it from his crew. It's kind of this personal touch that comes with working with Pete and Alice.
There was a sense of the amateur game in the way that Pete and Alice ran their business operation. They had, when people like Jack call Pete and Alice to try and get a hold of them to talk business, when Pete and Alice were not physically at the home themselves to answer the phone, they would forward the calls to Pete's mom. So, anybody who called might just get Mrs. Di coming out of the bath or something, when they were out of town. So
listen, the Czar appreciates this. I still see all the NLU customer support emails. Okay. Small shop stuff, dude.
That's right. Cuts both ways. You know how to get in touch with it. Yeah, there's good stuff. I mean, he was talking about how, we barely worked on more than one or two courses at a time. The home is scattered with all these routing plans. There's not a room that isn't full of maps and correspondence and emails and photos. I mean, they're true sickos, man. They were into it. This might be the spot to talk about rental cars. He said they did not own a car. They just rented cars wherever they were. And they had a contentious relationship with the rental car folks. Charlie,
Pete was a ritual destroyer of rental cars. Just took them on site, roughed them up. Somebody told me that he knocked a door off on a tree at one point. Eventually, I believe it was National Rental Car was his company of choice, according to Bobby Weed. They decided that they just needed to keep the car that Pete rented for him the next time that he came to town in a given city and just write that car off. Don't give Mr. Di a fresh rental car. Just leave this junker on the lot, and that's what we're sending him with next time.
But they kept giving him the cars.
They would give it to him like he would, like when he'd come to Jacksonville to work on the stadium court.
Yeah.
He'd pick up the rental car, he would trash it, he'd drive it back, and they'd just kind of move it off to the side, leave it as just a hell.
I'm surprised they didn't ban him.
I know it's kind of wild, right? But there's really, really good stuff, good stories about the rental car game.
God, that's a sick block, man. One less thing you got to worry about.
Yeah,
that and like building your house out of trash. It's like this is good stuff, guys.
Utilitarian.
That's right. Back to the honors course, located on 460 acres, the base of White Oak Mountain, north of Chattanooga, Tennessee. Jack got to the site with Pete. We kind of talked about this in the Dean Beeman section a little bit. I think he expected to kind of like, hey man, let's go walk the land together. And he was quickly dispatched of that idea, sent away. Pete went for a big solo walk for 5 or 6 hours by himself. I think this is kind of part of his process, I would have to imagine, which again, we're talking about artwork. We're talking about creativity. I understand that.
And I want to pause on that for just a second, because I go to some of these courses, not Pete, any of these golf courses, famous, and I just think about like hacking it out. I'm like, why, how did you decide to put the green there? I mean, we said this at Sand Hills, Deej. It's like, why there? Yeah. I'd be so paralyzed with like these big plots of land, and you chose to build in this top left corner because one green site, it almost must just flow from, I love this green site and I have to route it. That's the start of the maze. I don't know. I've just always found that the most fascinating part of walking around the land before any dirt's been moved.
There's a wonderful quote from Pete in the book where he says, in the initial stages of construction, I sometimes sit for hours on a certain fairway and just gaze up and down a particular hole. What I'm doing is visualizing every potential shot a golfer may hit. I take into account potential wind conditions, varying yardages, the angle of the shot, the obstacles to be overcome, and the intended route I foresee to the green. And since, Pete said, I'm only 5'8", I make certain that golfers my height or less can see greenside bunkers and portions of the green from various locations in the fairway and rough.
Which to that point, it's like, I can imagine that would be very hard to do with an owner kind of chirping in your ear about like, oh, come over, you got to see this over here. Like that's got to be.
And I was thinking that this would be a great spot. You just picture the Southern accent, and this would be just a great spot for a short three right here.
Which Pete, like he talks about this too. He's like, these, obviously the honors course, Chattanooga, beautiful city located in the mountains, like great scenery. He's like designing a golf course on a site like that comes with its own challenges because the owners get very, very attached to the landscape. and they're not used to seeing massive changes. They can't really picture, like, what do you mean you're going to take down all those trees? It can be like a really weird thing, which I think is why he pushed, again, artist comp. I think he pushed for a lot of creative control. On that note, one of the unforeseen things that ended up happening, they took a bunch of trees out to clear some corridors for the golf holes, and they would always burn the trees kind of when they would take them out. And so they started burning the first pile of cleared trees, and they ended up triggering a massive allergic reaction from a neighbor, which led to like a revocation of their burn permit. So they had to figure out other ways to get rid of the trees. This was a one that PB was the project manager on, and so he got so he got to flex his bulldozer chops on this one. No idea whether he was mountainside driving people off the sides of mountains with those bulldozers at all. But big time rain during construction. Pete gets dad jokey, says they consider drawing up plans for an arc. The downside of this site was the soil. It was this nasty red Tennessee dirt called chert, I believe, CHERT, a glue-like substance that Pete says still makes him shudder when I think about it. Doesn't drain, so apparently the only way to deal with it is you just kind of spread it over the top of everything and just hope for the best.
Or spread sand over the top of the chert and then hope for the best. Yeah.
Alice, of course, hanging around. She strikes again on this one when they're looking at the 10th hole and the place that they have kind of cleared out, and they're all really loving. She blurts out, so this isn't going to do at all. The fairway needs to be lowered at least 10 feet, which they're kind of like rolling their eyes and like, oh my God, do we really need to dig this fairway out 10 feet? It gets worse. They agree that it's the right call. They're like, all right, great, let's do it. The problem was they dig down 2 feet and they hit this bedrock of limestone, and it cost $300,000 to blast all the limestone out of there. Jack jokingly told Alice, thank you for the idea. Please leave the premises and never come back, which was good.
At least we know, Neil, Jack was good for the $300,000 with his Coke bottle fortune.
Sure. That's true. He was liquid. It sounded like they used the rock for, I've never been to honors either, but it sounded like they used the rock in a productive way.
Yeah. PB took the limestone and bulkheaded the lake by the 9th green with it, and Lupton loved it. And I believe they applied it in other parts of the course. I think it was like, that actually looks great. Let's do that in a bunch of other spots.
Eating every bit of the buffalo.
I love
to see it. Let's talk a little grass, Neil, because Lupton was firm with Pete. He was calling shots. He said he wanted the fairways at the honors to be a blend of Bermuda with a relatively uniform texture. Pete and PB were trying to convince him to use Zoysia, but they ended up getting overruled by the guy, writing the checks. PB with a little bit of dye subversion here. He ended up planting a little patch of Zoysia on the approach area to the 6th green. Kind of a let's just see. Lupton noticed it. He did not sneak it past him. He was pissed when he saw it. However, the winter kind of came through, took its toll on the Bermuda. The Bermuda did not look great. The Zoysia just kept growing, and Lupton called back and said, you know what? I was wrong. I love the Zoysia. I want it on the rest of the golf course. Pete told him, no problem. We'll be great. We'll redo it. We'll have the fairways playable in about 2 years. You should be good to go. And Jack, again, liquid, said, no, I don't think you understand. Like, I want Zoysia on my golf course. I want it now, to quote the great Veruca Salt. Pete writes about this. He says, I think the owners of every nursery between Cincinnati and Tulsa must have thought they had died and gone to heaven when we called and bought every single yard of Zoysia they had. Trucks were blazing the interstates towards Chattanooga. And within a week, Jack had his fairways sodded with Zoysia. Just buy up all the Zoysia and plant a whole golf course of sod. It's just pretty unfathomable, wild, man.
Yeah, it is.
So obviously, if you know Zoysia grass, the ball sits up, creates this kind of, you had a great quote in here, Charlie, from Judy Rankin, calls it boringly perfect lies that you get off of Zoysia. But the good thing is, I mean, it's on a mountain, right? It's or near the mountains. It's got enough friction for balls to come to rest on uneven lies, which I think adds some challenge. A couple notable tournaments at the honors: the 1991 US Am, which was notable for a couple different things. Good one. Justin Leonard had an awesome shot at this one. The ninth hole is like 365-yard par 4, and Justin Leonard and his playing competitor both missed the green like just right, like 4 yards right of the green, and his opponent's kind of chopping it up, and he ends up chipping it across the green. There was a lake on the other side of the green, and he ends up chipping it across the green straight into the water. And the shot was like so demanding that Leonard actually wedged 90 yards back to the fairway. He was greenside, and he wedged 90 yards back to the fairway so he could hit a full wedge into the hole. And yeah, hit it on the green, 2-putted, and ended up winning the hole. True match play situation. It's
good stuff.
Good stuff. That 1991 USAM also notable because Tiger Woods played in his first USAM there at the old course. Tiger had his half brother caddying for him. Don't know a ton about the half siblings of Tiger Woods. I think they're pretty estranged at this point, but I think Earl had 3 kids from his first marriage.
That's right.
Earl Jr. is like 20 years older than Tiger, and Kevin was another one, 18 years older than Tiger. I think it was Kevin that was caddying for him. Just kind of a notable thing if you want to read about his half siblings. Again, kind of like the teeth of the dog situation. It's not a great read, but you can dive into that on your own time. I think Earl Woods Jr. was arrested in 2013 for calling in a bomb threat to his place where he worked. Just kind of a bummer story. There's a Rick Riley story about kind of the falling out between him and his half siblings. So some additional research for those that are into it. But Tiger, when he got to the USAM when he was 16 at the honors course, he said, I was telling my caddy, who was his brother, there's half brother, I hope the gallery gets bigger. And it didn't. I'm not really that famous yet. If I can get on tour and do well, then I'll probably open some eyes. Tiger ended up missing the cut for match play that year, but he came back 5 years later for the NCAA championships in 1996, and they set a spectator record for the 4 days. Tiger, of course, would go on to win. He shot 69 on day 1, broke the course record with a 67 on day 2, 69 again on day 3. The course was kind of known as being a ball buster, so they really turned it up to 11 on the last day. Tiger shot 80 and still won by 4 over Rory Sabatini. Tiger was the only player under par, which is very, very, very sick. But it's kind of a quick abbreviated spin through the honors course. Next up, guys, we're going back to South Carolina, the Honey Hole, and we're talking about Kiowa. This is of
course.
This is a big one. I mean, song wise, I think Charlie nailed it with this one. We're looking for a song that's like commissioned, essentially, right? Like something that is, maybe composed for a feature film, produced under extreme stress and deadline pressure, completed barely in time, ultimately a big brawny success. I think this is Eye of the Tiger by Survivor. Charlie, I'll let you drive home why.
I'll take credit for that one. That was maybe my one actual song submission for the catalog. Stallone asked Survivor to write this song for Rocky III after Queen denied him permission to use Another One Bites the Dust. So we have shades of PGA West was the original course that was supposed to host the 1991 Ryder Cup. For reasons that we'll get into, it was moved to Kiowa. So that's kind of the synchronicity that I went with on Eye of the Tiger.
Let me open with this quote, Neil. This is good stuff from my guy Larry Guest at the Orlando Sentinel in 1991. This is how he summed up Kiowa. Quote: "This latest of man's intrusion to wildlife is the most ridiculous creation to date by Pete Dye, a man who somehow came to design golf courses instead of gas chambers and thumb screws. I don't know what he has against golf, but all those tricked up TPC courses he begat were only a tune-up for what is destined to become the most controversial land use this side of 3 Mile Island." End quote. We used to have takes, man. We used to have an opinion section in these newspapers.
God, that's good.
I had such a good time going through the old newspapers that they have out at the Ocean Course Clubhouse. I talked to a few wonderful folks there. Roger Warren, I mentioned, I think in episode 1, president of Kiowa. I talked to Jeff Stone, the current superintendent who knew Pete. Brian Gerard, director of golf, George and Mac Fry, original superintendent, and his son. So I got lots of on the ground Kiowa perspectives, and they have these big, just laminated newspaper clippings from 91 Ryder Cup with all these hot takes from various outlets.
Yeah, I think we're starting there. We're starting with the 91 Ryder Cup because that is the straw that stirs the drink here. If you want to hear, Charlie mentioned it, I think it's episode 425 of the No Laying Up podcast. Solly did an epic deep dive into that Ryder Cup. Great on the ground voices, talks to people who played in it. It's really, really good. So go listen to that if you want more on.
It probably led to a few grays for Solly too.
For sure. He was
for some just for men usage from Solly. He worked his balls off on that episode.
I texted him about that and he said it almost broke him.
Yeah.
Yes.
It's a really good one. But I think kind of even winding back from where Solly starts that episode, Pete got a call in 1988 with the news that the 91 Ryder Cup had been moved. Like Charlie said, it was originally supposed to be at the stadium course that he designed at PGA West out in the California desert to the proposed course at Kiowa. I think heavy emphasis on that word proposed, because for the first time, the event had been awarded to a course that did not exist. A heady concept, especially in 1991, because at the time of the phone call, there were less than 2 years to build this golf course, which again is like when you do see something like this happen with, PGA Frisco or something like that. I mean, we're 10 years out. We're, whatever it is, it's a big time window. 2 years is crazy. I mean, Charlie, like, how did this happen? What are we doing?
Yeah. So this story, in addition to the people that I talked to that I just mentioned, comes from both Solly's pod and an excellent pod about the construction of Kiowa from Fried Egg that Garrett Morrison and Andy Johnson produced. They got a lot of firsthand tape from some folks who built the course and who are no longer with us as well. Jason McCoy, the project supervisor. So that's like a whole hour plus story on this, which I'll try to burn through in a little bit less time here. But the PGA had a contract with Landmark, which is a development company behind Oak Tree and Mission Hills, and they also had the PGA West was one of their properties. But there were a few reasons why they decided to move the tournament from that course. One of the reasons potentially was that PGA West was disliked, to put it mildly, by the tour players.
It was too hard.
Way too hard. Ray
put some piece of shit putting contest.
Ray Floyd called it spiteful and hateful. Tom Watson called it awful, artificial. Bernhard Longer said it was silly. I mean, the players were not into it.
They went as far as making a petition to Dean Beeman demanding that PGA West not be used again. So do we want to send our homegrown players to this course that they all hate for the Ryder Cup? Like, maybe not the best idea. Also, do we want to play in the desert in September? Average temperatures there in September in La Quinta is over 100 degrees. We've got the TV window to consider with afternoon matches in California. People are asleep in Europe when those are happening. There are a few factors swirling.
Yeah, it was also going to be, to the TV point, it was like the first year that NBC was going to be broadcasting the event. It was not as big of a deal as it is now, but you had the close call in 83, and then you had Europe winning in 85 and 87, and all of a sudden it's a contest. And so by the time 91 comes around, they're expecting it to be a pretty big, TV event. And so kind of prioritizing the right windows made a ton of sense. And so Jim Autry, who you mentioned, he had this close personal connection with the guys at Landmark, and he was asking, can we get out of this agreement with Landmark? And he said, no, definitely not. Like, we're having the event, but how about we could move it to this course that we're thinking about building at Kiowa? Like, we can kill two birds with one stone. The idea is kind of, we've got this new course that we're going to need to publicize. You guys need a new course. Marketing. It's kind of a good you scratch our back, we'll scratch yours sort of situation.
And how did that work out? Pretty freaking well, I think.
Yeah.
He's had a few of these bonanzas just right out of the gate. Yeah. Big event. Boom.
Well-worn territory here. Course is 21 miles south of Charleston. Kiowa gets its name from the Kiowa Indians. Another tough land deal here, according to historians. The Kiowa Indians First befriended the settlers in 1670, and in 1675 they were convinced to sell the land of Kiowa Island for nothing more than, quote, cloth, hatchets, beads, and other goods. Probably less than they would have got today, I would assume. Because of the environmental restrictions, a term that we're probably going to use a lot here in the next few minutes, there was no land that there was no housing that they could build on the land. So it was pretty much just for a golf course, which meant that Pete was like a kid with a lollipop. He was ready to rock on this site. He immediately fell in love with it. He joked he might have traded in Alice for the opportunity to design a course on such a magnificent property. I think some other people took a little bit more convincing. Charlie,
here's some tape from Jeff Stone, the current Ocean Course superintendent, talking about walking the center lines of this site in 1989 with Jason McCoy, Pete's project manager.
In 89, I was doing an internship up here, and I think that's when I remember walking the center lines with Jason McCoy, and it was just, wild marshlands and wax myrtles and rattlesnakes. And it was nothing but just a barrier island out here.
Jason McCoy was noted for scaring Pete half to death on multiple occasions by shooting rattlesnakes at point blank range that were 2 to 3 feet away from Pete and nearly giving him a heart attack.
I can't get over the snakes. I don't think I could get used to that.
Yeah.
Just like, I got this wetlands in my backyard. I'm like, I don't know if I want to walk in there. I can't see where I'm stepping.
No.
It's tough, man.
Who knows what's in there? This part we can kind of breeze through. I think this story is pretty well worn territory here as well. But we talked about the environmental restrictions. Hurricane Hugo famously wreaked havoc on the South Carolina coastline in 1989, right as they're getting going, building this golf course. 130 mile an hour winds, 20-foot storm surges, massive flooding, $6 billion worth of damage. There was a big, massive, like one big massive dune that was protecting the golf course from the ocean, and it kind of got chopped up into all these broken apart choppy dunes after the storm, and it also just blew away all of the crew's marking stakes. There were a bunch of trees that got ripped out. The whole place was windswept. There's salt water all over the golf course. Pete, the only way he could get around was in this little rowboat with a electric motor, trying to figure out what the hell they're going to do. And now again, this is a year and a half before the Ryder Cup. They're trying to deal with all of this stuff. So a massive setback for construction, obviously. However, Hugo brought with it kind of a silver lining from the golf course perspective, Charlie.
Yeah, the big takeaway was that they managed to use the chaos to their advantage. The environmental regulators had their hands full dealing with this enormous cleanup effort all along the coast in South Carolina. And so the crew kind of did some sneaky shit, according to folks who were on the crew.
Ask for forgiveness, not permission situation.
There was some of that. I have tape from Roger Warren here, president of Kiowa, talking about Pete groveling in front of some environmentalists.
The story of when Pete was beginning to do the ocean course and they were working on it, and then Hugo came through. It is a true story that as all of the clouds went away and everything was going on, Pete was out on a bulldozer on the site trying to move dirt around and probably shouldn't have been there. Didn't ask for permission, but he was called in for, I don't know all the details, but he was called in to an agency who wanted to challenge what he was doing and why he was doing it. And he walked in, and when he told me the story, it was so funny. As I walked in, I got down on my knees and I said, "I'm sorry, I did what I did. You got me. I'll never do it again. Please don't make me change it," or something to that effect. And so, and he's laughing and I'm laughing. And I think that at the ocean course particularly, the impression was that he was doing things that people who are conservationists today would look at and say that he was not honoring what should be done out there. And I think that's exactly the opposite, because when it rains, fresh water will sit on top of salt water. And Pete created a system whereby they could pump the fresh water off of it and use it for irrigation and collect it. And there's a whole system there of the ponds that interconnect.
which is good stuff. There was another one too that kind of came from some of the storm stuff too. This idea of fertigation that I really like. There was a essentially what happened, the storm came through, and what stabilizes these dunes is all the vegetation that's on there, and the roots grow down and kind of hold the dunes in place, right? And when the storm comes through, it rips all this vegetation out, and they have no idea what they're going to do and how they're going to replace all this. So explain what fertigation is a little bit.
Yeah, so essentially what they're doing is they're introducing liquid fertilizer into the irrigation system that can be directed to these sandy dunes where they transplanted sea oats to stabilize them. And this works, as Roger told me. Like it would be oversimplifying to say that they were just like bad, evil guys who, crushed all these protected wetlands, which they did some of that for sure. But their intentions were not like strictly evil. They were trying to get this course done, and they came up with some interesting ways to maintain ecosystems as well as tear them apart.
We mentioned in the first episode, I think, but the idea to raise the fairways up, that came from Alice. You're building a golf course right next to the ocean. The golfers can't see the ocean. We need to lift these things up. That was great. She was a great example of kind of not being on site all day, every day. So when she did swoop in, it was a little bit of like, oh, why'd you miss that spot over there? I think she could kind of see things with a little bit of clarity that the people who were very zoomed in probably couldn't. And
you call this an ocean course?
Yeah, exactly. So that again is one of those things that it makes the views that much better, but it also makes it that much more difficult to play because your ball gets beat up out there. I think in that spirit, it probably makes sense to go down to talk about the wind. There's not really a prevailing wind at Kiowa. It kind of goes from both the east and the west, and that leads to some fun variability in the golf course. But it also makes Pete. It forces Pete to like think about this in a very meaningful way, right? He's got to design tee positions. He's got to make the greens bigger and more, receptive in different ways. And that's why you end up seeing like massive greens out there, because he's kind of designing two courses almost like simultaneously to play for two different winds. So big long tees, big long greens, some of them like as deep as like 40 or 50 yards. It's just it's a very thoughtful.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. It is very hard. It's very hard. Charlie, I know you had some remarks on this. A big, and Neil, I'm preaching to the choir here, but play the right tees type of golf course.
Yeah, I learned from you and Solly, Neil. I just have the image burned in my mind of you guys in the clubhouse after your match, just looking like war-torn soldiers, having played the tips. So I played it from 6,500 and had a delightful time. Super fun.
Yeah, if you play the right spot, there's a lot of room, right? That's the concept, anyways.
On the subject of those greens, DJ, there's a quote that I really like from Jeff Stone, the current super, who talked about watching Pete shape contours on a Sand Pro.
Pete was he was just a character. He was such a fun person to be around. I mean, gosh, I forget how old he was when we were doing some work out here late. I mean, might have been one of our last changes, and Pete was out on a Sand Pro, doing a little bit of shaping and stuff. And I'm like, just watching him work by himself, you could just see that he was in paradise. He truly loved what he did, and it was just like he would do it for free. He really would.
I had a similar feeling watching Bill Core on a Sand Pro not long ago, just for 4 or 5 hours straight, just in concentric circles, shaping half an inch or quarter inch by quarter inch on one green complex.
And Pete would say, he goes, look, and I talked to him a little bit about it, and he says, it's all in feel. You can feel it in your seat as you're going around and driving the contours and stuff. And it was, and then after the golf course was done and mature, you would then come out late in the evenings where you see the shadows and you talk about the contours and things like he was talking about. That was really, it was just artistry. At the end of the day, it's just artistry of what he did. But he would also, he painted a picture that was both, pleasing to the eye, to the everyday golfer to come out and play, yet challenging and brutal to the tour player, where he really had a vision where he was putting tees back where nobody even knew we had tees, but he had the foresight to see that the game of golf was evolving and the players were changing and that the golf courses were going to get shorter unless, you had this land and tees, to where you could lengthen it, wherever possible. So, but he was already doing that well ahead of everybody else.
All right, a quick break in the research here to bring you a word from our friends at Lagoon. The difference between good and great in golf usually comes down to the details, having everything dialed. And more for the guys on tour, that means how they sleep. That's why we have partnered with Lagoon, because the idea is simple. If you custom fit your clubs, why would you custom fit your pillow? Go to lagoonsleep.com/NLU. Take a 2-minute quiz, maybe less than 2 minutes. It's a very easy quiz. They're going to match you to the exact pillow that fits how you sleep. And each pillow is adjustable, so you can dial it in exactly how you want it. Stop spending the first 5 holes trying to loosen up. If you're serious about those marginal gains, start with the 8 hours before your round. Go to lagoonsleep.com/NLU and use code NLU for 15% off. That's lagoonsleep.com/NLU, code NLU. This is a great reminder. I got to go pack my Lagoon travel pillow. Those are the margins we're going to win Tour Sauce on this week, baby. Let's go. Back to the show.
We're at the part of the program where we're hearing colors.
That's right.
You can feel it in your seat. I love that.
That's right. You can feel it in your seat right now, Neil. We're however many hours into this. Speaking of the tour players, I mean, he kind of got his kudos for this one, for all the chaos, for all the the problems with the construction, for all the turned up, for all the wind. I mean, people
media shuttles.
Yeah, people other than our guy from Larry at the Orlando Sentinel, I think people were pretty into it. Payne Stewart was talking about how it's much more fair than PGA West, demanding if you don't hit the greens. Ron Whitten was talking about how it's so much greater than the sum of the sum of the ocean course is greater than its individual holes. American Ryder Cup captain Dave Stockton talked about how if I didn't have to worry about the Ryder Cup, this would be the greatest golf course in the world. Love that quote. It's just there's a lot of really good positives. There was a guy we're going to meet in the next chapter, Jimmy LaRosa, who was invited by Pete to come join him at the War by the Shore. And according to Jimmy, when Pete walked alongside the rope line, there people were chanting "Pete die, Pete die." They love you, big man. It's good stuff. But I think before we close it, this one doesn't fit anywhere else. Charlie, we got to talk about the raccoon.
The reason that I put the raccoon in this chapter was there's a reason. So Pete mentions in the book that he's a friend of the airlines. He bought so many one-way tickets, but he occasionally was known to cause problems on flights. There was a rotten banana at one point that he imported a whole bunch of bugs onto a flight, and everybody was swatting the bugs out of their faces. Separately, he wrote in the book that he, quote, found a baby raccoon and decided I would take it back to Indianapolis for PB. I hid it in my heavy jacket and none of the flight attendants noticed. So during the flight, Pete dozes off and this raccoon sneaks out of his jacket, allegedly crawls along the seats and ends up in the bouffant hairdo of the woman sitting beside him. Don't know about that last part. That sounds a little fantastical to be true. All of this did, except I asked Jeff Stone about it because I heard in another interview that Jeff had visual confirmation of this. And sure enough, he had a photo of Pete with a raccoon at some gathering. And he asked Pete, I asked Jeff, what was the deal? Why was this raccoon hanging around? And Pete said it was the only one who would listen to him.
I need you to try that next time you're hopping a plane, Neil. Just squirrel away a little raccoon.
I don't know if that's going to fly these days,
yeah,
man.
I think it might have been a little different time on the airlines.
Yeah.
We got 2 courses left, guys. We're rounding third here. We are going to go next to West Virginia, a golf course I knew absolutely nothing about. The namesake, Pete Dye Golf Club in Bridgeport, West Virginia. This opens in 1995, which might seem like a big jump, but that's because it took a hell of a long time to build this place. We're going to get into that. Song comps, a little bit of a later, big swing later in the career, big love-hate relationship between kind of an artist and a producer. It took ages to complete. I'm thinking The Wall. I'm thinking Tusk, the Fleetwood Mac.
Tusk does it for me. That gets it.
I think that
Chris Gaines.
Yeah, I think
big swing.
I think definitely big swing. Emphasis on just the time here that this one takes. couple sources that will come up. Top 100 golf courses is great. Golf Digest. But Jimmy LaRosa, the son of the founder of this golf course, has a Substack that you found, Charlie, that like detailed the whole history. It was really, really great.
Gosh, yeah, just dozens of entries just telling this whole, multi-generational saga. I would sign on to work on a documentary about the creation of this course alone.
All right, let's get into it. Ironically, Pete Dye, not the first call to design what would become the Pete Dye Golf Club. The developers, the LaRosas, aforementioned at the War by the Shore, first reached out to the somewhat fledgling at the time firm of Mr. Gary Player to design the golf course. They had gone so far as to sign an agreement with Player's people, but at this time, Pete was, he's kind of the guy. He's the most famous designer in the States. When they convince him to sign on, when it, holy shit, he might do it, they need to find a way to get out of their contract with Gary. And so the father and the son, James Sr. and James Jr., they fly from West Virginia to Charlotte for a meeting with Ron Kirby, Player's design partner, to break the news that they're going to go in a different direction. Very surprised to find that Mr. Player himself is sitting at the table when they get there. And James Sr. kind of clams up.
Good morning, James.
James Sr. kind of clams up at the time. And so Junior, is in his mid-20s at this point. He has to take the lead. He kind of just, he kind of front streets it, gives it to him Billy Bean style. We're going in a different direction. Sounds like Gary responded with a ton of grace, understood the dilemma. Can't say I blame you. Pete Dye is a hell of an architect. We're early in our design business, yada, yada, yada. I get it. But what could have been Gary Player designing on a coal mine could have been electric stuff. The course is a tribute and a reflection of coal country, Neil.
Okay.
People said it's the connection with coal that makes the Pete Dye Club so special. It's dedicated to the millions of coal miners who've given their lives to that industry. Charlie, that hit pretty close to home as they were building it, as they kind of almost lost some people themselves.
Yeah, the LaRosas were coal miners, as we'll hear about. And during construction, a bulldozer collapsed into the roof of an old mine shaft on what is now the 13th hole. James Sr. went in to inspect this collapsed shaft. Let's go check out what's going on down in here. And apparently forgot the first rule of coal mining, so I'm told. Don't go into a dark hole without ventilation. So in Jimmy Sr.'s, his son's Substack, says the shaft was filled with black, damp air stripped of oxygen. He, Jimmy's dad, collapsed almost instantly. The operator pulled him out, but he was unconscious for 10 minutes before coming around. By the time the ambulance arrived, he was breathing again, but most miners never survived such a thing.
A little bit of background on Jim Sr., who you're looking at if you're watching the video here.
With PB Dye there on the left.
That's right. He grew up shining shoes at a bus station. He was, he would collect and sell junk. He'd carry luggage for train passengers, whatever he needed to do to get ahead. His parents were Italian immigrants. His father worked as a laborer for a local construction company. After serving in World War I, he purchased 1,600 acres of land at a coal sale. This did not prove immediately successful, but he later, he doubled down. He risked every cent he had to purchase almost 50,000 acres of coal country. Shortly after this, the market turns upwards, and life is good. Jim Sr. was not a golfer, barely acknowledged the existence of the game prior to his son Jimmy Joe's interest, according to Pete. But he was interested in moving shit around, moving earth around. He was a big fan of that, which is kind of great.
Yeah, Jimmy, the son Jimmy gets poetic with some of the history of the land and the property where the course ended up. He said, when golfers talk about course architecture, they usually point to green contours and bunker shapes. Yet every ounce of soil lifted in 1978 moved more than dirt. It displaced centuries of frontier skirmishes, immigrant sweat, and coal camp camaraderie. Understanding that lineage lets you see each fairway not just as playable ground, but as a living timeline, one you're literally walking across with every round.
Just a reminder, like that quote right there is like all of these courses are these very rich, influential people's Taj Mahal.
Yeah.
And some Pete Dye has to navigate all of that as well as like, hey, yeah, we don't have any roads either. I got to build, like the actual work, and then also just like the emotional stuff like this.
Exactly I like right. that this is like more of an American dream style story with the developers, the La Rosas, though, Italian immigrants pulling up from bootstraps, collecting junk, like scrimping and saving to buy a bunch of land. So it's interesting in that regard to me.
A little bit of a Casa de Campo situation. They looked at a couple different sites. The first one, they had this like 4-mile hike out to where the golf course, where they were going to look at it. I think during that time, they had to go through this old railroad tunnel, and a train came through. And so Pete and Jimmy had to like pin themselves against the wall to let the train go through. He called it an ordeal that bonded us for decades. The site was no good. Pete said they were going to have to call it Miracle Mountain Golf Course because nobody would ever finish it. It'd be a miracle if they did. But Jim got back to work. He got a bunch of topo maps and survey maps, and he started looking for other land, and ended up, Pete was like, yeah, call me back if you find something else. And he did. He found another piece, and they ended up, Pete came back and he said, I'll be happy to build a golf course if you give me the keys and you stay out of my way. And Jim did one of those things. He did not do the other. Pete would go on and say that the toughest, most tenacious, never give up son of a gun I've ever worked for is James D. La Rosa. According to his son's Substack, Pete's nickname for him was the crazy Italian hillbilly coal miner, which just rolled right off the tongue. Charlie, what was the issue?
So you said that James Sr. stuck with one of those two conditions. And you also said that James Sr. loved to move dirt around. Well, he had a habit of fiddling with the Enterprise when Pete would go out of town. He had some ideas, and he may not have been as much of a ball knower as Dean Beeman was, for example. There is story after story of this course, Neil, where Pete goes out of town, for example, and there is let me make sure there's a body of water, a huge lake near the clubhouse that they had dug out. Somebody told Jim, hey, if you want to host a big event here, you want to host a US Open or something, you're going to need parking. So Jim went looking for parking space, and Jim just fills in the lake. He said, let's put the lot there by the clubhouse. Pete comes back into town. Where the hell did the lake go that we dug out? And Pete, at multiple times over multiple issues like this, Pete would say, I'm not coming back until you dig the lake back again. Like, dig it back out, undo everything that you did, start from scratch. There was an old
come on, Pete, you don't like it?
Over and over. There was an old railroad tipple, like a big structure that's used to load mined coal into railroad cars that wound around the 10th hole. Pete loved this, and he wanted to kind of lean into some of those details. There's you have to drive your cart through a mine shaft, I believe between the 6th and 7th hole, somewhere on the course. So Pete says, let's preserve these details. He leaves Clarksburg. Tipple's gone when he comes back. So he threatens to disappear again unless Jim rebuilds it. So Jim rebuilt it.
Yeah, it was just kind of that on repeat.
He just wants to be on the crew, man. He wants to be one of the wrecking crew.
Just want to be part of your crew, man. He had a lot of suggestions. We mentioned this in the first episode that Pete didn't always do so good with suggestions. He was not a quitter, though. He just kept getting shots up. He urged, apparently, Jim urged Pete. He said, I think on the 17th hole, we should build the smallest green in the world. That would be awesome. We should build the smallest green in the world. And Pete said, oh, interesting. Okay. And he went ahead and built a 17,000 square foot green, allegedly one of the largest greens in the world at the time. For comparison, I think the greens at Old Mac are some of the biggest in the world. They're like 14,000 square feet. This was 17,000 on the site that he wanted to build the smallest one ever.
To be fair, it's apparently a very small puttable area on that 17,000 square foot green. I'm not sure exactly how that works, but even still, Pete's like, no, contrarianism.com.
Yeah. So anyways, all of this and a couple other things led to quite a timeline on this project. By the early 1980s, Pete was on site more and progress started moving along, but it wasn't unusual for Jim Sr., Jim Jr. to be on the...
So, sorry, 1990s.
No, this is the early 1980s.
Oh, okay. So we're going back.
Got it. Yeah. To when
we didn't
started.
tell you, we're burying the lead. We didn't tell you how long this course took. I think DJ's saving up, but it took a long time.
Yeah. We can say it took like 17 years to.
Okay. So it's because you said it was open in 95.
Yeah.
It took 17 years to build the golf course. But Jim Jr., Jim Sr., they're on the phone with Pete like nightly, giving him updates, giving him instructions. And Pete sent one of his lieutenants, Max Robertson, to lead the operations on site. And it was around this time James started reading some architecture books, about Mackenzie and Ross, so he could, quote, assist Pete in any way, i.e., kind of learn enough to become dangerous. There's a big disagreement on trees. We're going to see this pop up, again, one more time before we're done, specifically the oak trees on the second hole. I think these, Jim really wanted to keep these, Charlie, and Pete was not having them.
Spoiler alert, they did not keep the trees. Jim showed up one day to find smoke rising from the direction of the second hole. He was sick to his stomach, stopped work till he could talk to Pete, fearing some kind of terrible mistake. And Pete said, Jim, Billy Bean style, had to get it done sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we're doing it. I don't know what to tell you, which is, again, such a weird dynamic where it's just there's one guy, writing all the checks, and Pete's now at this point where it's just like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to be telling you what to do, which is great. One of the things they had to do is they had to lay over 2 miles of 6-inch pipe because of an irrigation problem. They had to run all this irrigation pipe because the water source wasn't quite right. I mean, there's just all kinds of things that kept popping up. The project obviously turned out to just, a wildly expensive situation. They ended up irrigating a ton of land. Charlie, I know this kind of dovetailed with some of the Kapalua stuff.
Yeah, so Kapalua is this massive property, 112 irrigated acres. They're working on getting it down to 100. This is at the heart of a lot of these water disagreements that we reported on earlier in the year. 112-ish for giant property. Neil, how many acres do you think the Pete Dye Golf Club irrigates?
150?
240.
Okay. Whoa.
Lots of water, lots of cost. Lots of cost just kind of across the board. And I don't think there was no home sites. They weren't turning it into a development. Like, there was no delusions that this was going to be some huge moneymaker, which was okay, right? Like, they had the money to build the golf course and they were down with it. Jim agreed to build a 235 acre buffer around the course, kind of like we saw at the golf club, which, he was just going to continue to keep purchasing land around it to keep the sanctuary nice and secure. And then comes the economic turbulence of the 1980s. If you got any project this long, I mean, it's going to have a recession or two, probably.
Yeah,
and
caught up in the junk bond.
Yeah, the recession, inflation, energy markets. I mean, the La Rosas are tied up in commercial real estate ventures that start falling apart. It's tough to the point where they have to refinance the project a bunch of different times throughout the 80s, came close to foreclosure at least 3 times. And as we learned, I mean, it's not like Pete's doing this on the cheap. This isn't really like, he's not really finding the most inexpensive way to build this golf course. But he said in his book, he introduced Jimmy to friends who quietly helped navigate those financial challenges. Don't know what that means. Interesting. But yeah, we can read into whatever we think that means. There's a day in the 80s that's very notable because Pete stops by the construction trailer. He was famous for, one of his Dye-isms that we talked about in the first episode. He kind of just operated on like a handshake, didn't really have a contract. It didn't seem like they really worked out a lot of specifics on the fee or anything like that beforehand. It was just kind of, I'm going to find people who are going to pay their bills and it's all going to work out type of job. And so he stops by the construction trailer for coffee and he shows Jimmy, the son who's kind of running things, a copy of the newspaper. And there's an article in there that says Jack Nicklaus just charged the first ever $1 million course design fee at the time, roughly like $4 million adjusted for inflation, ton of money. And Jimmy's very worried about money at this point. His stomach is like starting to twist into knots. Like, oh my God, Pete's about to ask me for, essentially $4 million. And he asked him, he's like, Jimmy, I'm going to need a little money. And Jimmy's like, oh my God, Pete, it's going to take a few days. I got to try to see where we're at with some account balances. And he starts laughing. I think he probably knew he was twisting the knife a little bit. He said, no, sorry. I just need a couple $100 so I can get back to Florida, which, another one of his one-way tickets. But they kind of just keep going, fits and starts for the next 5 or 10 years, kind of chipping away until.
God, it's this. This is the first time I've ever heard of this course. Hand up,
same.
And this is like the Sagrada Familia. I'm way in.
Neil, oh my God, that's what I wrote at the top of this doc. This is the Sagrada Familia of the catalog.
Fantastic. I love it.
Thank you.
And I mean, I'm kind of skipping ahead, but it's like pretty much everybody who was part of the design team, because everybody's touched this place, right? I mean, it was under construction for so long. That's any of Pete's disciples have, had some sort of a hand in this.
A pilgrimage. All right, send them up to West Virginia first, and then we'll figure it out.
Exactly. There was, of course, an Alice aspect to this golf course. When she first came to visit, she was, suggesting moving mounds around. She needed to make things more playable. A lot of the standard stuff. She kind of noticed there wasn't enough forward tees, and she was asking, not so subtly, do you have plans for this to be a men's club? And Jimmy admitted the idea had been kind of tossed around. It was pretty unlikely, but we're thinking about what we should do. And she spun around to Pete and said, Pete, if this is going to be a men's club, you're not going to finish this golf course. And he said, okay, sounds good. Which, again, going back to the golf club, I think that was kind of throwing up a flag there that I think that this is the point where they got the juice. They can call shots.
And he was probably yeah, you heard the woman.
Yeah, exactly. Which, who knows if he's, from a financial aspect, who knows if he's making good on this deal, or if he's, if he's getting bled dry, or if he's bleeding them dry. What's going on? I have no idea if he's yeah, let's just keep wailing away on this thing, or if he's get me the hell out of here. But yeah, interesting stuff.
Yeah, I've asked some folks about his fees and haven't been able to pry any good information out of people. I did talk to Lucas Cromines, the pro at Pete Dye Golf Club, and he was wonderful. Had some good backstory as well, in addition to the Substack.
Let's
about the membership and stuff.
We'll skip ahead a little bit to the name. The name is kind of the that's kind of the first question you got. Pete Dye Golf Club. They threw around a couple other names, obviously. The Coal Club, which would be kind of a sick name now that I hear it. Burning Embers, Cook's Mine Club, Chapel Point, Coal Ridge. I'm sure a number of other coal puns, but Pete and Jimmy were walking the 6th hole one day during construction, and Pete asked if they had figured out a name for the course yet. Jimmy said they hadn't. The process was becoming frustrating, and apparently Pete said, to hell with it. Let's make a decision. We'll just call it Pete Dye. And Jimmy was stunned by this suggestion, this honor, basically. You got the biggest architect in the world willing to name the course after himself. They shook hands. Jimmy said he became emotional, and they're out there looking at holes, and Jimmy gave him a wedge, or Pete gave Jimmy a wedge to hit a shot into hey, we're gonna have a green over there, hit a shot over there. Jimmy shanked the ball. He was just nervous and all overcome, and Pete just took the wedge right back, which is good. But kind of some. Again, God contains multitudes. Not really an aw shucks. Oh man, I'm just a guy who moves dirt around. Those guys are not usually calling things naming things after themselves. I think there's another good kind of a little ego kind of working in this direction.
Well, maybe late in the career, he's thinking about legacy.
Sure. Who among us,
Yeah.
We mentioned this with the golf club, but Pete was pretty forceful. I think that he didn't want this to be so restrictive that nobody was going to see it, which again is kind of interesting because it's a little bit the tail wagging the dog, right? It's the architect telling the owner how to run their membership program, and I think that's kind of an interesting element. I mean, they ended up settling on kind of this hybrid national club, limited residential members, but limited corporate members, unlimited national members. So kind of people could come from all over to see it, which again just kind of stands in a little bit of contrast to some of the early work, and I think shows he's probably getting a little more juice out of people seeing the places. But Opening day was July 4th, 1993. That was opening day for the front nine. The back nine was not ready till another year later. And Pete urged them. He said, don't do the grand opening until another year after that, which was 1995. You got to give it another full season. Let it settle. Let the bunkers, age. We've been working on this thing for long enough. We don't want these critics coming in and ripping this place before it's exactly ready. So again, like we said, imagine starting a golf course in 1978 and opening it in 1995. As Charlie points out, the Brooklyn Bridge took 15 years to build. Taj Mahal took 17 years, Neil. So there's a pretty good analogy for you there. But by the time the course was ready to rock, there wasn't enough money. We hear this with a couple other golf courses. Not enough money to build a proper clubhouse. So they had a double wide trailer, put in a kitchen, locker rooms, refurbish the interior. Later they would finally build a permanent solution. But
I mean, who among us hasn't gotten out over their skis on a backyard project?
Exactly.
That's what it sounds like having the La Rosa boys.
Exactly right. Kind of a bummer on the ownership, Charlie. What ended up happening here?
Sadly, in a way, the La Rosas no longer own the club. Jimmy is still around, but is no longer a member. They sold it in 2008, presumably during a period of financial difficulties. I'm told that some things happened in 2008. They sold it to a management company that manages a global network of courses, Pacific Links, and I don't think that went terribly well. They've got a new owner now who's apparently really well intentioned and is kind of resurrecting the original spirit of the course. So that's the bittersweet part. It's like trending back upward again. But I was bummed after going through that whole saga to learn that, they ultimately spent more time constructing the course the La Rosas did than they did owning it.
And I'm looking at a couple pictures here. It just looks like a really hard property to take care of too.
Yeah, this is a kind of view during construction here. It's it's striking, beautiful place. But yeah, I gotta imagine it's a difficult one to run for sure. Guys, that brings us to the end. That brings us to our last one here. We are, I think a fitting ending for me, certainly. We'll open with a quote from Pete. The word ardent does not adequately describe the enthusiasm that Wisconsin golfers have for the game. We are going to be talking about a golf course that was the vision of this man, Herb Kohler. We're, of course, talking about Whistling Straits and the adjoining the accompanying courses that go with it. Charlie, you were looking for a strong-minded producer and artist, people butting heads but becoming close friends against all odds. I love what you went with here. I got no notes on your suggestion.
I went with Kiss from a Rose. Just ridiculously big swing of a seal.
Seal. Sorry. Yeah, seal.
just a ridiculously big swing of a track, just super elaborate in terms of its instrumentation. But, if you're in the mood for it, it's like slaps, like it's pretty amazing. Harpsichords and flutes, maybe not strictly Irish origins in the sense of Whistling Straits was requested by Herb to make it look like Ballabunion. But, this was kind of a strange one for Seal as well, like not exactly in line with the rest of his catalog, but became super popular after getting synced in a Batman film. And, there's some big tournaments as well that helped launch the popularity of this. So that's what I'm going with.
This is absolutely bulletproof, Charlie.
I was thinking, I'll take Seal. I was thinking something, that picture just had me thinking Rick Rubin.
Oh God!
Sure.
For those not watching on YouTube,
just
we're
outrageous.
Flashing a picture of Herb modeling in something called the Habitat, which is a Kohler product. I'm not sure I know how to describe it. Is it a sauna? Is it I don't know. He's shirtless and he's hirsute.
The king of the bathroom, man.
He's a legend. Big Herb Kohler appreciators on this podcast. I think we start there, right? I mean, I think to understand the scale, the audacity of this big ass golf course, we got to start with the larger than life personality of the man who commissioned Pete to design it. Shane Ryan, friend of the program, made a terrific podcast. He called The Iron Will of Pete Dye, that goes into depth on the history of the Kohler family. Great series to go listen to. And Herb's relationship with Pete. going to borrow some historical notes from that episode in addition to some of your chats with Ron Whitten, some stuff in the book, and then you were just there a couple weeks ago, or last week, I guess.
Yeah, last week, cramming for the test.
Yeah, I love it. So this is our guy that we're talking about, and I think a lot of people picture him, at least myself, kind of that Citizen Kane towards the end of his life. Just very polished, put together guy, the elder statesman of the golf world. You always see him in the front row of press conferences and looking dapper, crazy cool suits. How does one get there, right? How does one become the titan of the kitchen and bath industry? In Herb's case, the answer is one, inherit it from your family, right?
Sure.
He took over the Kohler company in 1972 when he was 33. 2, run it with tremendous zeal and competence for 43 years, spent 61 years total working at the company, helped grow it into an absolute behemoth. Truly, I can speak from firsthand experience, both living nearby and coming from a long line of plumbers.
Your favorite plumber's plumber is in the pie house.
That's right. I love this stat, right? It's like, think about how many golf pros there are in the country. There's 30,000 people or so, PGA of America professionals. It's about the same amount of people working at the Kohler company. And it's a big operation. And so in the 80s, Kohler's kind of just getting into the hospitality business. They would obviously get much deeper into this later when they purchased the Old Course Hotel and some of the other kind of big name golf properties. But Herb played a huge part in that diversification. He decided to take an old building up near Sheboygan where it used to house factory workers, and they ended up renovating it into a 5-star hotel called the American Club. I've only stayed there one time. It was before our chaotic dream loop video that we did. I think I slept for about 2.5 hours before I had to get up, but it was very nice. Great toilets, great showers, as you would imagine. Guests who stayed at the Kohler compound initially provided pretty basic feedback, right? Like, this is great, and Sheboygan and Kohler and Haven and all these towns they're great, but it's like, it'd be good if there was a golf course here. There's not a lot to do, and so took that to heart. And in 1982, he wanted to oblige them. He went looking for golf course designers. He ended up hiring Roger Packard from Chicago. That employment only lasted about 3 days. I think living on the leading edge of design was Herb's mantra. Neil, we need you coming up with a mantra. Like that. But apparently Packard was not creative enough to meet that mantra. He wasn't seeing his lines. And
that's not Larry Packard, the double dogleg.
Correct.
Guy.
This is a different guy, okay. Roger Packard. And he thought that the approach from every hole should look down on the greens, apparently. And Herb thought that was not it. That was too basic. Hey
man, that's
Herb was looking to host majors. He's out there trying to harvest majors, which mission accomplished.
It feels like a perfect fit with Pete,
right?
Dye.
Herb is very intrigued by the hoopla, right? The spectacle. Think about the spectacles we've got under our belt at this point, right? You've got Sawgrass, you've got the honors course, and all of the lore that goes into that. Also the land, like not that dissimilar from some of the stuff in the Sheboygan River Valley there. Twisting landscapes, changes in elevation, things like that. So he ends up calling Pete Dye, hey, come take a look at this land. And when Pete drove by the Kohler headquarters, he was very impressed. He, kind of I guess you could pay your bills type of green light that he saw. And the first of 4 courses that Pete would end up designing for Kohler was about 15 minutes south of what is now Whistling Straits. It was on land that, was punctuated by the beautiful Sheboygan River, called Black Wolf Run. David Kohler said that both Herb and Pete were irascible characters. Great word. Irascible. I love that because they were both really, really good at what they did. There was mutual admiration, game, respect, game kind of situation, but also like neither of them was really willing to budge. I think that brings us to probably the famous elm trees, Charlie, of Black Wolf Run.
Yeah. Shane, in his Iron Will of Pete Dye podcast, tells the story of this grove of elm trees that was in Pete's way. Let's just look at it from Pete's perspective. It was right in line with the 17th hole at Black Wolf Run. And Herb did not want him to get rid of these trees, shades of the honors course as well, shades of Pete Dye Golf Club. Pete called Herb one afternoon because, he wanted to iron out some of the details and hash this out. He asked Herb to come out at 5 p.m. to Black Wolf to discuss it on site. Herb, busy man, couldn't make it right away, said he'd be there as soon as he could. Time kind of got away from Herb, and at 6:30 p.m. or so, he drove his old Jaguar out to the site. He couldn't find Pete, but what did he find? A giant pile of smoking timber containing the grove of elm trees that Pete had ripped out with a bulldozer and burned. These were apparently significant trees because they were the last of their kind in the entire state. An elm beetle had killed so many of them. They were 80 feet tall. Herb was pissed. Pete had skipped town. Pete, I don't know where he went, if he got on a plane, but he was not present.
Grabbed his raccoon, got the fuck out of there.
Come on, 60. We got to get the fuck out of
here. 60 was there.
60, number 12. Let's go. Come on.
Herb was inches away from firing Pete. To Pete's credit, he came back, faced the music. They had a big argument, but somehow they got over it. They became great friends. They went on vacations together. But Shane kind of paints this in his pod as, Pete must have been, as I think you said this earlier as well, Neil, like how charismatic must this guy have been to still get Herb back on his side after this, you want to call it a lie, but just like an outright, disobeying of these orders.
Well, he was probably like, "Hey man, you didn't show up, so
sorry."
It's
There's a quote from Herb Kohler, I think, again, maybe the best quote in this whole thing, where he called Pete, quote, "a great liar, a constant storyteller, but there's no one I respect more." I think that's like as good as it gets, man. I think that's great. He had, Shane Ryan talks about this in his podcast too, but he has this kind of slippery quality, right? Like he's not lying, he's not telling you the whole truth. It's a little bit of like, let me just by any means necessary, I gotta kind of get what
like, you can't trust me, but I need you to trust
me. Exactly right. Yeah, there was another one,
and it works.
Yeah, and it's just funny that they ended up getting along so well together. Or maybe it's not funny, maybe it makes perfect sense, right, that they ended up getting along so well together. But Herb ended up passing away in September of 2022 at 83 years old, but would live long enough to see the Ryder Cup come to his course. There's, I know it's in here, Charlie. There's another story that like is so weird that I don't even know how to bring it up. It's like he writes about how Herb learned that Pete had once provided, and there's no context here, just quote, a special irrigation service to a house of ill repute in La Romana, the Dominican Republic. And so they're down there vacationing one time, and Herb invites, again, Pete's writing about this, 3 colorful ladies of the evening to Pete's birthday lunch. And in addition to gifting him a god-awful squawking parrot, he paraded the women over to Pete, where they plastered his forehead with kisses. I don't know what's good. I don't know if you have any more context on this, or if this is just what's in the book, but just another one that's kind of like, what the fuck what are we talking about here? What is this?
I have no more context on it, but it's very Better Call Saul, Jimmy McGill and Kim Wexler setting up Howard Hamlin through some elaborate series of events that I don't understand, but I love it. I don't know that I would have liked to party with her, but maybe I do. It's tough to say. I don't know about you, Neil.
Go to a Toros game and then hang out with the ladies of the night. Sounds like that's what Herb's into.
Seems like it, yeah. So he builds a river course, later the Meadow Valley course. They combine those two. They take 9 holes from each one and kind of make a 36-hole property over there at Black Wolf Run. U.S. Women's Open, Sayri Pak, a whole lineage we could get into on another episode over there. But eventually they want to keep going. Herb finds this acreage along Lake Michigan, very picturesque land that he wants Pete to come take a look at. Pete's absolutely gleeful when he's invited to come check this out. He's got a total blank canvas to create what Herb wants, which is a links style course on Lake Michigan with these big giant 70-foot bluffs down to the lake. If you've not been, it is almost impossible. unless you're like a local or you haven't done a lot of other golf travel, like somebody there every day refers to it as the ocean, right? Like they are constantly just like, oh yeah, you got to start this one out over the ocean. Oh, watch out for the ocean over there, because that's what it does look like that, right? I mean, it's very, very, very striking. It always looks different. It's a different color of blue depending on the sun. It can look like the Caribbean. It can look like Ireland. It's just a very cool, striking piece of land.
Great Lakes are on the list of things that are
so sick. It's also, I mean, like, this is kind of one of the criticisms of the place too, but it is not how the land originally looked, right? I mean, it was a pretty flat site originally.
Yeah.
Dead flat. Yeah. And interestingly, Kohler had owned 300 acres of dunes or farmland along the shore, but their controller donated most of that land to the state for a park, quote, to settle some dispute, unquote. I'm not sure about the context there. I asked the archivist and some folks at Kohler, and they didn't know what that dispute might have been, but now there's a state park, some sort of Kohler donated state park. So Herb had to negotiate with the Wisconsin Electric Power Company for the land that became Whistling Straits. And he gave him a bunch of cash, convinced them to take some land that he would buy across the highway. And really what stands out to me driving in there is this Disney World Imagineering effect of it, as Ron Whitten put it to me, like the suspension of disbelief. You are enveloped by these artificially created dunes as soon as you get down the driveway, and you don't think about the road or anything else except for the lake and the golf course for the rest of the time that you're there.
Yeah, I mean, that was the directive, right? It was like, make it look like Ballybunion. And I mean, Pete was good at building stuff. That's kind of how it looks when you get out there. It's pretty easy to convince yourself, and you can quibble about whether that's good or bad or sustainable or not, or too expensive, or what its place in the golf world is. But Neil, you gotta admit it's electric when you get out there and that wind starts whipping. And I mean, it feels like the real thing, and you get out there on the right day. I can definitely attest to that.
I also want to say, that Kohler threw in some, I'll redo the bathrooms for the union to that electric company too. There's some faucets involved.
I think that's probably right. Crew on this job ended up working through the winter. Another thing I could attest would be unfun. Heavy equipment operators. Pete says they could maneuver on on frozen Lake Michigan. I don't really know how far out on Lake Michigan they needed to push any bulldozers. I might throw up a flag on that one, but we'll see. Maybe he meant the lakes around the golf course.
He said they could.
Yeah, I don't know if they did. Let's get into the bunkers here, because the PGA Championship famously comes to Whistling Straits a couple times, 2004, I believe, and then 2010 again, when we've got the famous Dustin Johnson incident. Martin Keimer wins, but before the PGA, Ron Whitten, who we've referenced a million times, took it upon himself to go out there and count the bunkers. He said, this is absolutely outrageous. I'm going to go count them so I can get a number. He said it took 11 hours over 2 days to go count the bunkers. You want to make a guess, Neil, or you want me to tell you?
I'm going to say, if it took that long, I mean, it can't be more than like 250.
967 was the final number that he came up with. So in 2015, the PGA comes back to Whistling Straits again. Ron decides to redo his count because he's convinced that there's been a couple more added. He's right. There's now 1,012 bunkers in 2015, an average of 56 bunkers per hole. The par 4 eighth is where you're going to find the most. There's 109 bunkers on the eighth hole. The par 3 12th has the fewest with only, quote, 18.
I must be have been staring at the lake during the whole Ryder Cup, because I'm just like, I'm not visualizing that many. Maybe I'm just seeing waste areas. I don't know.
There are bunkers that are 200-300 yards out of play, just like part of this Imagineering, like, luring your eye into all these weird places. Like, there are some strange spots just in nowhere land.
If you're curious how many truckloads of sand were needed to create this dunescape, create these bunkers, create all of this entire playground, the answer is 13,126 truckloads of sand.
From a nearby farm, apparently.
That's right. Just for context, Davis Love's quote was basically like, he was asking him about it, and Pete just said, "Oh, it's like they're meaningless. Like they're just there to distract you. They're just there to get in your head," which is great. Let's talk about the 17th, par 3. You probably got that vision of Jordan Spieth running down the hill towards the lake would be the immediate visual, at least for me, that pops into my head. Famous hole for its optical illusion from the championship tee. There's a bunker on the far right that kind of obscures a pretty big portion of the green, which is bigger than it appears from the tee. Of course, there's always more room than you think. You just got to not be a coward. But there was another pretty big disagreement here between Herb and Pete and Alice and what to do here.
Alice wanted to put a pond in. Herb wanted to do something else that Pete doesn't specify in the book. And Pete wanted to do his own thing, which is where we ended up. Spoiler alert. So to commemorate Pete going his own way, as he was occasionally prone to do, Alice made a card for Herb, and she sketched 3 boxes on it. And one box said, Herb said, another box said, Alice said, and the last box said, Pete did.
There you go. They were, I think they leaned into the push and pull a pretty good bit. But you've mentioned Abe Wilson a couple times. Who is he?
Abe Wilson worked on Pete's cruise as a shaper for quite a few projects, including a number of revisions at Straits. He built French Lick with Pete. He started when he was young and impressionable, 22, I think, and we've got a lot of good tape from him. He actually lived with Pete and Alice for 8 months at one point. He was a lovely, very humble guy who had some good and different stories about what those experiences were like.
So finished up Virginia Tech, and I'm still young. I didn't know what I wanted to do. Go back to school, wasn't sure. And Pete reached out, said he had a project in South Florida, and asked if I was interested in it. And like I did the rest of my career, I just said, yes, sir. And he had me write down an address, and I packed up everything I owned in a U-Haul trailer and drove to South Florida. I got there, and I pulled in his little circle drive, and he walked out, and he asked me what the hell was in the trailer, and I said, everything I own. And he shook his head, and he says, well, you're living here, you don't need anything. So the first day there, I spent getting a storage unit to put all my stuff in, and I lived in their house for about 8 months. They were there at the beginning, and then they were up at Crooked Sticks. It was in the summer. But he came back and forth, but yeah.
So it was news to you when you arrived that you would be living with them at their house?
I had no idea. And that was pretty common. I lived there a couple different times. I stayed with them at Crooked Stick a couple different times. And it was nice. We were always working later than dinner hours, but you could come in, sit down, and chat with them about the day. And, it was times I'm not going to get back that you cherish,
What is your insight into how Pete thought about renovating or making changes to Whistling Straits before some of those big tournaments?
So that started in 2008 for the 2010 PGA, and I don't think Mr. Kohler was too happy with the scores, the prior championship. Pete didn't like that some of the holes weren't getting any TV time, and we started with number 3 and number 6. We thought we should make 3 a little more visual, a little more intimidating. So we did the bunker work on the left and made it feel like it was hanging over the water or the ocean, as he would call it, a little more. And then I put that bunker in the middle of 6th green out there. And when we flew up from French Lick to look at this project, and it was the first time I had ever been here, landed, get to the golf course, and it was so foggy, you couldn't see 10 feet in front of you. So we're out there, and at the time, Dave Swift was the superintendent. He's taking us around. Standing on 3T, I didn't know which direction the green was. And then we went up, looked at a few things, and then we go over to number 6, and he kind of drags his foot in a dew line where I should cut this 6-7 foot deep bunker in the middle of the screen. We look at a few other things, and we get on the plane and we leave. And I drive back up the next day, and I come out, and it's beautiful, sunny. I'm like, oh, this is what this place looks like. And I get out to number 6, and it didn't really get marked out very well from his dew line. And just thought, well, we'll figure this out. I started on 3 first, but he didn't come back for a site visit before I went to 6. And I was really nervous painting that out and taking that hole in the middle of that green. It was either going to be a hit or I wasn't coming back.
So what happened? How did it go?
He liked it and went from there. I ended up having to leave to go finish up in French Lick, and they invited me back many times after that. So I guess it worked out okay.
Interesting. Well, I'll be thinking about that when I get out there.
Don't go in there. I mean, go and stand in it, but don't hit your ball in there.
That's such a great example of the manner through which he conveyed an instruction. Anything else, straights or otherwise, come to mind when you think about him sketching in the dirt?
Yeah, he liked dragging his foot, but one of the things I always got a kick out of in our walking back and forth, whoever was around, to get visuals, he'd tell somebody, stand right there, and he'd tell them, stay there. And then we'd walk a couple 100 yards that way and over here, and he'd tell them to hold their hat up and down, and he'd yell back, stay there. And sometimes he forgot about that person, and they'd be there a while. And I can't say it didn't happen to me before, but he told you to stay there, you stay there. And you kind of know you crept up the ladder a little bit once you were walking with him and looking, and not just the guy standing there. That's always kind of been a joke between me and Chris Zugel, who's out here, because I think he had Chris stand somewhere one time, and Chris thought he was forgotten about, but we came back and got him.
How long did you remain in place when that happened to you?
Till he told you to move. And so, like I said, sometimes I think he would forget.
Talking hours,
and it
days?
might have been on purpose. It was usually 20 minutes, depending. But if you moved before, he didn't get mad, but he'd bust your balls a little bit.
Why don't we tell the sheep story, Charlie? I think that's a good place to close. We talked goats. We talked old prunes down at Sawgrass. We had some similar wildlife situations going on at the Straits.
Yeah, so Herb had some prized sheep on property who were roaming the dunes, doing their thing, milling around. 60, I'm not sure which iteration of 60, which breed of dog was with Pete at this point in his life, but 60 got a little hot for the sheep and started chasing him around. And Pete wasn't looking one day on site, and he looks, and 60 is off in the distance, just hauling ass after the sheep. Sheep runs right off a cliff into the lake. 60 jumps in after the sheep, starts swimming out into the water, and Pete's running out there and manages to haul the dog out of the water, but the sheep is just upside down in the lake. Oh, sadly. It turns out that a reporter witnessed this scene while on the golf course, and Pete was mortified because the Herb was very serious about these sheep, and Pete goes up to the reporter, starts kind of trying to sweet talk him. I forget which paper it was, but he's sweet talking this guy, and the guy's not saying much, and finally Pete just lays his cards out and says, look, like, please don't publish a story about this. Herb is going to shoot me if you do. And the guy just kind of laughed at Pete's predicament and published a little story anyway. But Pete says he was 2,000 miles away by the time it showed up in the paper. So lived to tell the tale.
Yeah.
God, shout out to 60.
At least that 60 specifically.
Yeah, that's 60. Yeah. Good version.
Exactly. Whistling Straits, obviously well publicized. We had all the PGA championships that I mentioned. We had the Ryder Cup in 2020. We've got or 2021 got pushed to 2021. The Jordan Spieth moment, the cigars afterwards, of course, Bryson driving the first green, walking off like a gladiator. Just the sight of some all-time moments in the world of golf. But I think that's going to do it for our 10 courses, guys. That was a mouthful. That was a lot of info crammed in there by Charlie and his research. Pete ended up living until the age of 94. He died in January of 2020. He'd been fighting Alzheimer's and dementia. Ron Whitten ended up writing a beautiful and sad article about visiting Pete in 2018 when he was not doing so well at that point. Had a couple years towards the end of his life when he was not out in the dirt, but he did. I mean, he pushed it to the limit, man. He was doing stuff well into his 80s, still in the dirt, designing courses, crawling through bushes, tweaking stuff. I mean, just a true golf life lived to the fullest, as you can tell from this 5 hours of conversation here. But
I got a question for you. Any courses you guys that were, number 11, number 12 that you felt they should be getting honorable mention here?
There were a couple of honorable mentions. French Lick for me was one of them, which is just a tremendously strange property perched on top of a mountain that had a lot of dirt moved. I don't know about you, DJ, if you had some others lingering.
Yeah, PGA West is a famous one, but it's a lot of pretty similar stuff to the Sawgrass stuff, conversations about technology, but the stories about digging out the bunker on 16 and all that is pretty good stuff. But those are probably the main ones that spring to mind. But
because it's got a lot of them, man.
It's crazy.
Oak Tree and Old Marsh.
I didn't realize he did River Highlands. Up at where they put Travelers.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Oak Tree's another one that's like you said is another great one.
Gasparilla. Maybe that's not the same. No, they play that at Palmacia.
Yeah. I think the kind of lasting or final thing. I think you asked a really good question in our prep, Charlie. It's just like, are we going to see this again? Are we going to see another Pete Dye? I mean, I think there's a lot of reasons probably why not, but I'm curious, Charlie, kind of at the end of the line, your take on that.
Yeah, I was thinking about, the extent to which he was a man of action and the time in which he operated. We talked about some of these environmental restrictions or lack thereof, that he was able to do some of the maximalist kind of things that he did that just are not necessarily possible anymore for a number of reasons. And yeah, I'm just curious, like we're in this era, Neil, you've referred to it, of these incredible minimalistic designers and architects letting the land tell the courses where they want to go. But I'm curious, like, was he a once in a generation or once in several generations type of creative force? There, Mike Strantz is a name that gets thrown around or by Ron in that creativity sort of lane, but someone who passed away too soon. It's just something that I've been riffing on.
I feel like a couple things will make it hard. I think you need another big golf's booming, so I don't think you get one now. It'd have to go through a little bit of a dark age. And these guys now are just working on better land. And that's because the secret's out that people will travel for golf. I mean, we'll go to, the middle of Nebraska, above the Arctic Circle. And I think there's I remember the first time I heard about Bandon Dunes, I was like, man, you go all the way to Oregon for that? And then you go and you're like, yeah, okay, I'm going back as much as I possibly can. And other than Casa de Campo, and now he's got 100 courses, so this could be a faulty take, but most of them are built near a resort area, like tough land. It's almost like the scraps of a development or as part of a development. So he had to build near populations. And I just don't know if that land's around. I think these guys don't have to do as much as he did is maybe what I'm getting at there.
Yeah. And I think it's harder than ever to do stuff like you're alluding to as well, Charlie, right? Like there's more restrictions on stuff. Water is becoming, a bigger issue. There's a lot of the good land has been taken. There's a lot of, the deck is kind of stacked against it a little bit, but this is just me. I mean, I think we're coming out of this second golden age. You hear a lot of people talk about that with the current crop that we have. I feel like you hear just enough whispers from people, and I love all of those places as much as anybody, but you hear just enough whispers of okay, I've seen this. What else you got? I've seen, width and angles. I got it. Okay. Yeah. Minimalist. I got it. I almost wonder if you do have, everything's so cyclical. I almost wonder if you do have a little bit of an urge, a little bit of an itch for somebody to come in and do something really bold. It's just really hard for somebody to break through, get the capital to do that, get the crew to do that, get the expertise to do that, and kind of be turned loose.
You could give Rob Collins and Tad King a little bit of that, right? Like with Landman, and I think they're probably in that string a little bit. yeah, well, it's also like he was able to, some of it too, he's able to do it just because nobody was paying attention.
Yeah.
So there wasn't any, I don't want to say there was no competition. It was like
the stakes didn't feel as high.
Yeah, the OG guys, and it was like, I'm just doing my own thing over here. But like, I don't even really, it didn't seem like early on he really cared about making money.
Right. It's he's a fascinating character. Charlie, you did a great job bringing him to life.
Yeah, man, good stuff.
Let's
here.
end.
Thanks, guys.
Let's end with this quote from Tom Doak. It said, "Pete was the most creative seat of the pants style engineer I've ever known. One thing I admired about him is that he was happy just to be out there working in the dirt. Really didn't matter what the site was like as long as he had something to do." I think that sums it up. I think that's an aspirational North Star to incorporate into whatever your building golf courses is. Just get out there and do something. I think that's my takeaway from reading about Pete Dye.
Amen.
That's going to do it. Charlie, great work. Neil, great job sticking with us, asking great questions. And guys, I don't know what we're going to do for the next one. We got to figure out a next topic, a next golf course, a next frontier. We're going to we'll think about it and we'll get back to everybody. But enjoy the rest of your guys' evenings, and we will catch everybody next time. Cheers.
CVK here, just chiming in to thank everyone who spoke with us and helped make this whole epic production possible. In no particular order, starting with a few of the guys who worked with Pete directly on his cruise: Bobby Weed, Bill Core, and Abe Wilson. Also to Dean Beeman, Davis Love III, who I spoke to at Sawgrass, to Ron Witten, the former architecture editor at Golf Digest. Thanks to Kerry Corbett and John Farrell at Harbortown, the former and current directors of golf, respectively. Also to Karen Moorhan there on the media and PR side, and to Bryce Trout, caddy extraordinaire. At Kiowa, to George and Mac Fry, father and son duo. George was the original Ocean Course superintendent. And to Jeff Stone, the current superintendent there. To Roger Warren, the president of Kiowa. Brian Gerard, the director of golf, and Brian Hunter on the media PR front. Thanks to Bob Patton at Long Cove, to Lucas Cromines, the pro at Pete Dye Golf Club in West Virginia, and at Whistling Straits. Thanks to Chris Zugel, the director of agronomy there, to Amanda Liskey, one of the archivists at Kohler, and to Nick Doctor, the media PR person at Straits. Thank you so much to all of those folks. And if you're still hungry for more Pete Dye info, DJ mentioned we're going to put out a Nest podcast featuring a medley of some of the extra firsthand tape from all of those chats. Believe it or not, we got through almost 6 hours of recording, and there's still tons of good stuff that got left on the cutting room floor. So check out that Nest podcast if you are so inclined.